Hi, it's George here from the Unofficial Controller podcast. Just taking a moment to, first of all, thank you for listening. Means a hell of a lot to us. Secondly, every week we bring you free content, the latest news, the new releases, a feature of note, normally something to do with games or gaming past, be it one of our history of documentaries or an insight into the industry itself, or how games have affected us as people. Well, yes, we incorporate you, listeners, into that. All we ask is that you drop a little comment on our post on social media and you can get featured on the show. Hey, do you know what? You may even win a prize. The only charge for this is £0, 0 pence, $0. That's right, no money. But all we ask is that you like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you found this show. And if you're feeling a little bit cheeky, tell a friend, get them to do the same. We have a Discord that's free for you guys to all join in and get involved in, and the community on Instagram and Twitter is alive and thriving. So don't be a lonely gamer. Make yourself known. Thank you. And now it's time to begin this week's entertainment. Take care, guys. Hello and welcome to the Unofficial Controller podcast, your weekly gaming podcast, episode 95. It's a big one, guys. Mike Rouse, AAA gaming developer by day, YouTube legend by night. With me, George, as always, joined by Bobby. But this week, as I say, we're honoured to be joined by the man that gave David Beckham a face, Mark Hammond some wheels, PlayStation a home, Muggles magic, and even made us all pop stars. A man who needs no introduction, because of the way I put this script together. I've already dropped his name twice. The mighty, legendary Mike Rouse. Mike, we're humbled. How are you?
I'm extremely well, and it's amazing to be here.
Well, welcome to New York. Obviously, we probably had to smuggle you over on a speedboat because of the whole lockdown thing. So it's probably not right to get a guest sort of rammed into a small fiberglass compartment on a speedboat. But I'm sure that we've made up for it since.
And I requested extra pillows as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not sure if you got them. I hope you did.
The box seemed to be full of fermented cheese, so I brought some with me.
Okay,
and we can pig out on that while we're having this podcast.
Yeah, I'm down. That's great.
I would argue that's probably not cheese, Mike. And if El Buccio finds out that you've purloined that from his locker, I don't know. Yeah, last time it cost me about 3 pints of blood. So we probably,
nice.
Yeah. Let's give new fans and old a rundown of how things are going to go on the show. Obviously, coming up, we've got the news, and in there some Switch XL Pro news. So that's something worth sticking around for, listeners. Then we've got the feature, which is basically a run through an interrogation like interview with Mr. Rouse there. We'll turn the lamp on and we'll grill you like hot bacon on like a small cafe on an industrial estate, free cup of tea. And then obviously the real deal, the man himself, Stingray, tears up the drive, or 5th of Main as we're now in New York. And then the show ends when I ask you guys what you're hoping to play for the gaming week, but the show cannot and literally will not begin until Odders grip taut on that bag of Getaway swag and that jar of jelly deals, friend, as I ask Mike and Bobby, what have you been playing? Guests' rights, I suppose, Mike. What have you been playing this gaming week?
I have been playing a ton of stuff. So I have a live stream plug coming in every Wednesday where I play an old arcade game. So we played Batman from the 90s arcade, completed it. It was not very good. So I didn't enjoy that one. But then I've been playing Mega Turrican on the Mega Drive, which I picked up.
Beautiful.
And I've also been playing Hyrule Warriors. I don't know if you guys have had a look at that. It's on the Switch, Age of Calamity.
I bought it. I just don't have it. I mean, I haven't played it, but I own it.
Oh, so, I mean, I'm a massive Zelda fan. And the gameplay is very repetitive, but it's got the storyline in there for the beginning of Breath of the Wild. So I'm geeking out on that. But any given week, I'm probably playing and completing 3 or 4 different games, most of them kind of more vintage or retro games, especially on my Sega Mega Drive.
Well, we'll get to that, but you're obviously going for the full PAL set.
Yeah.
I've always been put off by that. I don't want to go too deep on this, but my methodology has always been get a Mean Machines from back in the day, get a copy of Games Master from back in the day, and try and pick off the games that reviewed reasonably well. And then kind of avoid the rest of the library. But you said, no, to hell with that. Give me everything.
I did. A little bit greedy. I think it's I'm at an age now where I want to indulge childhood fantasies. And I'm very much, I will buy the games that I loved. But I got to a point with the Mega Drive and was like, why don't I just buy all of them? At that point, my wife almost divorced me because I told her how much it's probably going to cost, and that most of these I won't actually play more than once.
No retro collectors on their first marriage anymore, Mike. So,
No.
Welcome to the party, pal.
Yeah. So, I've undertaken it, and it's insane. It's I wouldn't recommend it. It's got its ups, but there's a lot of lows in there, especially when you're spending £30 on a FIFA 96, 98, 99. Those are the lows. But the highs are I've found a ton of games that I never knew about that are just absolutely brilliant. And those are the games that I'm playing through that I never got to play as a kid.
Oh, wonderful.
That's awesome.
Okay. Bobby, what have you been playing, sir?
We're continuing Sniper Elite 3. Authentic. We got to the 7th level.
Wow.
So just 2 more levels and some online trophies and we're done. And then we played For Honor a little bit. Marlon got the season 5 pass. So I said, okay, let's play it. We did about 15 duels and we won all 15.
Wow, nice.
So I feel really good about that. And I've just been playing Cyberpunk. I just got the all card trophy. And I'm just trying to do the 4 endings and then put this game away. I feel like I'm playing it for the whole year. I really have.
Are you enjoying it?
I was enjoying it, but I think getting that money for the car trophy kind of like, oh God, made it a little boring. But now that I have just the endings left, I think I'll just enjoy and see how each story branch, finished. Because apparently they're all different endings. So I want to see what ending I think is the best. I guess we'll find out this week.
Cyberpunk was the game that was going to get me to buy a PlayStation 5. And then when it came out and with everything that's been going on, I've been thinking, maybe I should go for Stadia and have everything if these consoles aren't able to handle it. But it kind of put a real dent and a downer on me wanting to buy a PlayStation 5 for it because I was really looking forward to Cyberpunk. But some of the sheen's been taken off for me.
I can see that. See, for me, when I first had it, it installed into like an external hard drive. So the first act was fine. But after that, I had so many glitches and it was just ridiculous. Then I realized it installed into the external hard drive instead of the PS5. So I just switched it back and I literally had no issues after that. So, I mean, for me, I guess I got lucky because I know some people can't even, play more than 10 minutes and it shuts down. But I've enjoyed the experience. It's just time for it to end.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just got to go.
It's overstayed its welcome, Seaman. Okay.
What about you, George?
Well, I'm a very strange, eclectic kind of guy. So I've been playing. Did I mention this last week? I've managed to get hold of a copy of Africa for PS3. And that game, graphically, it's quite nice, and I like some of the sort of the whole getting in the Jeep, going and taking photos of wildlife is actually quite mildly entertaining. And I'm sure when it came out, it was more of a technical marvel than it is now. There's a lot of sort of stretched and bland textures in between moments of like almost great beauty when the sunset hits and maybe you catch that animal doing this certain thing. It's been quite enjoyable. And the little grind to get new cameras, which are all sort of Sony based, is is kind of mildly distracting as well, and kind of nice. I've been trying to finish Little Big Planet 1, but I've like literally got 2 levels to go, and the difficulty level has just spiked. I wanted to just knock off all the Little Big Planets and play Sackboy's Adventure on PS5 just to see, because it's a very different game too. So I like to have a look at things through a lens. So like I did play Little Big Planet back in the day. I don't think I ever finished it. So now it's time to get them all done and then do a comparison. And I always threaten, I write all these things down in this book. So one day I threaten to do retrospectives on these gaming series. I probably need to get a life, to be honest with you, gentlemen, but that's where it's at. My PSP love has doubled down. So I've got my shell kit on order to make a black mint version 1. I've had some bits arrive, so I've managed to repackage my ceramic white one with a new front face. Beautiful. The difference the screen, just a non-scratch screen, makes to the quality of the image is unbelievable. Played a little bit of a Getaway. Obviously, with you coming on, I wanted to... It'll test a man's patience in this day and age, Mike. I tell you that now. Yeah, here we are at the Republic. Yeah, for the 8th time. You know, for the 8th time. But other than that, I was amazed as I was driving around. You obviously do the first mission, you go to the second area. And I was just taking it all in. The buses are in the bus lane, and the way everything sort of works, the traffic, and we'll get to this obviously in the feature. But one thing that startles me is that you didn't have a license for any of it, but unknowingly to you, you had the Fiat Punto in there, you had the Alfa Romeo in there, you had the Iveco truck in there. I don't know if you know, but they're all part of the same manufacturer group. So without knowing it, you probably could have bumped these franchises off quite easily because you'd managed to group all the different sections together, probably without realizing, which I thought was wonderful. And that's is that all I've been playing? Been playing some PSP, obviously, but that's quite boring for you guys. You probably don't want to hear too much about that. MotorStorm Arctic Edge on the PSP is an absolute joy, and you know, easy to pick up. I wanted to bang some things in to make sure everything was working, so they were easy games to slot in. God of War, again, that looks phenomenal on there. Little Big Planet looks phenomenal on there as well. Yeah, such a wonderful console. I've decided next month I'm going to double down and pick up UMD movies and the 2 sort of big box editions that I don't have. Yeah. Ah, dear, I need to get out more, don't I? Jeez, Louise.
Do you know, you mentioned this last time, that game Africa. I think that was a secret excitement for most gamers when they saw it. No one would go to school or go to work and say, "Did you see Africa? It looks amazing. I can't wait to get that." But you were sitting there at A3 going, "Oh, actually, that looks pretty good. I want that," but I won't admit it to anyone.
I remember I had a 360 at the time, and I saw the Africa trailer drop, and I was like, all the other stuff, forget it. Africa, I was like, oh, I think I might have bought the wrong console. Oh, no. And I did get a PS3, but it never came here to the UK. So, you know, disappointed. But getting hold of a copy, I've been waiting for one to crop up in the UK. And finally one did. And I was like, I got to have it. Remortgaged the house again for the 4th time. You know, no one's not got 4 mortgages now. So I thought, why not? 4 mortgages, 3 wives. It goes on, and a room full of degrading and rotting plastic and silicon, you know, that seemingly appreciates in value as it depreciates in quality. Unbelievable.
I had so many, you know, air quotes, games of shame growing up because you cannot be cool, you know?
Yeah.
Spyro the Dragon? Nah, I don't play that game. But I really was, and I really enjoyed it. No one knew.
A lot of teenagers had other materials under their bed. Bobby had Spyro the Dragon trilogy. Anyway, if that's news, that Bobby had certain clandestine materials under his bed, let's have some real news. We're scouring the very darkest regions of the internet to bring you the latest stories. First up, I shall go first, seeing as I've got my teeth in and the polygrip is firmly attached. Time to write a haiku. The real-life Island of Tsushima will be honouring the work of Sucker Punch Productions by making both the game director and creative director of Go to Tsushima permanent tourism ambassadors. Tsushima Mayor Hiroki Hitakatsu said this is being done because the pair have spread the name and history of Tsushima in the world in such a wonderful way, making them the first ambassadors to be awarded for sharing the name and the history of the island through their works. Sony will now collaborate with Tsushima Island to set up a new tourism campaign designed to teach fans about the place and its historic landmarks. In a statement, Hitakatsu said, even a lot of Japanese people do not know the history of the Genko period. When it comes to the world, the name and location of Tsushima is literally unknown. So I cannot thank them enough for telling our story with such phenomenal graphics and profound stories. Nate Fox, the games director, and Jason Connell, the creative director, will receive an award and the letter of appreciation to mark their efforts. The mayor then goes on to explain that he didn't appoint them as ambassadors to ensure any sort of collaboration in the future. This is all about Ghost of Tsushima. I did not appoint them for the purpose of having them to do anything in the future. Thanks to the two of them, Sucker Punch Productions and SIE, Sony Interactive Entertainment, I have heard from people all over the world who have learned about Tsushima through their works and now want to go to Tsushima. One example of this would be the fan base's pledge to help restore a damaged Torii Gate on the island, which went on to surpass its funding goal by more than 500%. That campaign finished this past Saturday after more than 2,000 contributions. Yuichi Hirayama and one of Tsushima's why do I always give myself the Japanese pronunciations? Watasumi Shrine Priest said, we've received a great deal of support from the player of the Ghost of Tsushima game set in Tsushima, and I feel that it's God's guidance. I'm very grateful for the support so many people during a cramped life due to the coronavirus and the challenging economic situation. Apologies to any Japanese listeners. I've probably called the first guy Brian Cat Food and the third and second guy, I don't know, disposable shopping bag, for which I apologise. Gentlemen, that is a real beautiful story, isn't it? That's been going on for some time. Obviously, the building of the shrine or the rebuilding of the Torii Gate and some other bits and bobs that's gone on there through people that have been inspired by games. Thoughts on that, gentlemen?
I think video games are a hugely powerful medium. And it's one of those things where people are so passionate, but that passion can bleed off into so many different areas. I remember when that terrible tsunami hit Japan, and one of the biggest communities to jump in there first and help out in anywhere they could was their gaming community. So, you know, I'm not surprised by this thing. I think games are a fantastic entertainment medium where, you know, we create these worlds that people live in, and you know, there's morals and there's goodwill that comes from those games that spreads and helps change people's lives. And I think they in return tried to bring that into the real world as well, which is fantastic.
I tell you what,
beautiful.
That might be the most eloquent and beautiful thing anyone's ever said on the show.
100%.
I think ultimately now I should use maybe a Minecraft sword and probably knight you, Sir Mike Rouse of the Unofficial, the first knight of the show, if I may be so bold. So, Sir Mike Rouse, arise.
Thank you.
Services to podcasts, that's what we shall say. Bobby, what's next out the post bag, friend?
We got It's Alive.
I like what you're doing there.
Thank you. I try. Although the Xbox Series X or S was launched last November, Microsoft's console teams are still in the phase of transitioning everything across to the next generation. This includes the Xbox Design Lab, which was temporarily suspended last October. At the time, it was mentioned how the lab was preparing for its next evolution, which suggested the team was ready for the arrival of the new Xbox the new Xbox controller. Earlier today, Team Xbox provided a minor update in response to a fan on Twitter. The good news is that Microsoft hasn't forgotten about the Design Lab, and yes, it'll be returning in 2021. The Twitter user was Uncle Noli at Purple S1 Slurp, Purple Slurp. March 4th, 2021, he says at Xbox, when is Design Lab coming back? I need to make a custom controller for the new Series X. Got to get some purple in the setup. Xbox responded, the Xbox Design Lab will be back this year. We'll keep you posted as more details become available. Although the Design Lab has been down since last year, Microsoft has been releasing its own colorful controller for the Xbox Series XS. In recent times, it's launched a blue shock controller and a pulse red one. There has been a request for a green controller, so if nothing official is announced, perhaps a design lab creation will do the trick. I've seen the blue controller. It looks really, really nice.
Design Lab, man, is actually quite a cool innovation to, be able to customize bits and bobs and really double down on that personalization. It's nice that they're bringing it back. One wonders why it probably even took a hiatus, but it's coming back with X and S support. So I would say full power to them. Do you think more developers should give you? Obviously, you can go on to, I think it's Nike's website, and you can build a pair of trainers from the ground up. You want the sole X color, you want the upper to be X, you can have these stripes, you can have this color laces and blah, 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 blah. And this is really the controller equivalent of that. Do you think we should see more of that?
Yeah. I'd love to see more.
Why not? Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I think Microsoft do a great job with this. I'm a Sony fanboy, even when I worked at Microsoft. But Microsoft do some really good fan service that I think Sony miss out on. And that custom Pro controller is really cool. There's custom achievements they give out. So if you're a day one purchaser of their console, there's an achievement you can get. So they do some really cool things for their community on Xbox, which I would love to see other people do. I'd love to be able to do something with the Nintendo Switch there. Official shells for your joypads that you could get custom made for you or something like that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah,
that would be awesome.
It certainly beats me lying on the lounge room floor with some very tiny screws in my mouth and a couple of sort of scientific screwdrivers, wondering, oh no, I've put it in upside down, or I've left that screw, or it's got lost in the pile of the carpet. What am I going to do? Some would say I should probably sit at the dining room table and do a proper job of it. But no, I like to take consoles and controllers apart while watching some complete ramble on YouTube. I don't know what becomes of me, really. One would think it would be helpful if I actually watched a strip down of said controller or console while I was doing this. But no, I'm probably watching Farming Simulator or something completely left field.
Yeah.
There's an insight again into my strange lockdown life that we lead. Bobby's like, well, the thing is, right, I'll put it all out there. There's no secrets or shame here. If you've got anything that you want to repent gaming wise, Mike, now will be the time. We can forgive all sins,
We can't forgive some sins, unfortunately.
Okay, right. Well, that's you'd be surprised. This unofficial controller holy water it's next level. It's slightly acidic, so it will burn the skin. I'm sure that will get rid of everything. Final bit of news. As the guest on the show, it's always right and proper for you to step in. What are you? This obviously is built around this amazing bit of news, and you, sir, as you will reveal shortly, have recently done a video on this using your insight as a AAA gaming developer and at night, almost like a superhero, a YouTuber.
Indeed.
Hit us up, please, sir.
So, protecting their investments. We've just reached the 4-year anniversary of the Nintendo Switch, and admittedly, compared to the next generation devices, the hybrid system is starting to show its age. How will Nintendo combat a possible decline in sales then? According to a new report from Bloomberg, a video game giant will fight to maintain market dominance this holiday season by unveiling a new Switch model equipped with a bigger screen, Samsung OLED display. This new system could sport a thinner bezel as well. The information comes from people familiar with the plan, with Samsung Display Co. to reportedly being mass production on the 7-inch 720 resolution OLED panel as soon as this June. The aim would supposedly be to produce just under 1 million units per month and ship the first batch of panels to assemblies in July. That's pretty fast.
Yes.
Yoshia Tamura, the co-founder of display consultancy DSCC, shared the following information about the new panel. The OLED panel will consume less battery, offer high contrast and possibly faster response time when compared to the Switch's current liquid crystal display. The unit will also support 4K ultra-high definition graphics when paired with televisions, according to the same sources. Nintendo and Samsung representatives declined to comment, and Nintendo's president last month said there'll be no plans to announce a new version of the Switch anytime soon.
Sneaky.
Yes.
So you've done a video on this. One would imagine there's a little bit of foresight and understanding of that without wanting to get you in too much trouble. You felt confident enough to do a video on it.
Yep.
What's your thoughts there? Is there going to be... for our listeners, obviously they can go check your video out. Retro Gamer Boy on YouTube. There's a finer repository of gaming eclectic mixes one could possibly never imagine to find. It's I became a member as well. It's only £1 a month. I encourage everyone to swamp down there and throw that. Reach down the back of the couch. You found £1. There's no better person to give that £1 that you never thought you had to Mike. All right. You get access to his secret videos. I want more secret videos, by the way. I want more. Yeah, just your personal little stories. You know, you sat and went through your PlayStation collection, and I wanted more of that. To be honest, I could watch you recondition a box live, uncut, because I do that. I would love to spend more time talking to you, Mike, because I could spend hours talking to you about the different Sharpies I've collected to match the different colour boxes that I may recondition. I've got this absolutely bang-on purple for 32X. Unbelievable. Oh, yeah.
Ooh,
an unofficial, jealous. Not that everything's unofficial, but the Bobby's like, is this man really talking about Sharpies? Yeah, I am. I'm taking the time. An unofficial Sharpie set that I picked up from God knows where, but the purple in it is bang on.
Well, we could geek out over this, couldn't we? We could have a whole podcast over this.
Listen, if you want to come, I'm just for my own personal collection, Mike, if I'm honest with you, and I'll just listen back to me and you rambling on about colouring crayons. Moving things back swiftly to the news before we get distracted. Obviously, you've done this video. Is there any more you can give us there? Because is it going to upgrade the actual hardware so we can have better games, one would imagine?
I doubt it. There's a possibility they could do. And a lot of people talk about the Switch Pro, and they've got that really from Xbox and PlayStation because that's their kind of business tact. If you look at Nintendo, it's more about let's make it bigger. As parts become cheaper, let's make it bigger and bump the sales again. So Nintendo haven't really ever released a console where they've split the market in a generation, and it's a very scary thing for a console developer to do, to split their market, because developers suddenly have two consoles to develop for if they're just releasing on one device. And what you often find, if you look at the Pro, for the PlayStation Pro, is that developers will go for the lowest spec machine because that's the easiest to develop for and the one that it's most likely to fail on, and then try up-res a little bit. So you don't get the full potential of a game when you have these split specifics in a console, because they have to develop for the lower end machine. So I don't think Nintendo are about to do that. I think they're going to do their classic. This is an XL. There'll be some technical benefits to it, bigger battery, that 4K when it's docked, but you'll be able to buy a brand new game and it should work on your original Switch. There's no way they're going to drop that X millions of sales they've got. And no publisher would say, hey, look, I'm just going to develop something specifically for this new screen device, which may have 1 million or 2 million sales in its first year and leave the rest of the Switch market behind. They're not going to do that. So XL is where I'm going for this. Less Pro, more XL.
Okay. This 4K, when docked, one would imagine there's going to be some upscaling there for original Switch games, do you think?
Yeah. I mean, they do that currently when you look at the game when it's running in handheld, it's doing dynamic resolution changes, right? So when it gets a little bit harder, it drops the resolution, and when it's less intense on the game, it ups the resolution again. So I think that's what we're probably looking at. I don't think the games have been developed in 4K because obviously it's got to run at that lower resolution on the game cartridge, and you'd have to increase texture sizes and all sorts of things for it to look good in 4K. So I think it's going to be an up-resing.
Yeah, and one would imagine space is tight as it is on those carts, and obviously on the storage medium of the Switch itself, unless you've upgraded or done whatever. So again, you've always got to work to the lowest common denominator. So that scaling of games from a software point of view is going to be a tough gig for them, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And it's expensive, those cartridges, right? If you look at a lot of developers now, if you look at Doom's a classic example. They could have gone for a more expensive cartridge and had the whole of Doom on one cartridge. But it took away from their profit and their bottom line. So what they do is they put the installer on there with a bit of single player gameplay on there, and then they put the rest of it as a download. That way they don't pay the manufacturing cost of the larger carts for the game. So you'll see that if you went to 4K, most games would just be installers on the cartridge, prompting you to download, which I doubt, not many developers want to do that.
No, it's a bit naughty, isn't it? Especially if you're I'm using some very strange examples here, but let's say you're a young kid, doesn't really have the internet or bother. You kind of take the console on the road all the time. You talk mumsy into getting you a new game in the shop. You put it in the console in the car, and it's like, no, friend, you're not playing this. Which he's a little bit naughty, really. Well, I suppose that draws a very neat line under the news. Thank you, Mike, for your wonderful insight there. I think it's added a whole nother layer of granularity to the news. So thank you for that. Question is, did we miss anything? Do you have an opinion or take on the news we missed? And let's face it, as always, we probably missed the biggest gaming news story of the whole week, but we'll just let it pass us by like a log in the water. Bobby, if the collective masses want to get in touch and say to me, George, why are you playing Africa? You've missed that massive piece of news. You basically sleep on all the hot content. Give yourself a shake. How can they get in contact and tell me that I'm a blithering baboon?
They could reach us at Twitter or Instagram at Unofficial Controller Podcast. They can email us at questions@unofficialcontrollerpodcast. And if they want, in those links, they can come and join the Discord.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. And now, El Buccio got on the phone earlier this week, and he literally burnt my ear off. He's like, are you still giving away a prize for best comment of the month? I said, yes. He said, are you charging people to be part of your community? I said, no. He said, hang on a minute. Are you running this Discord for free of charge? Are you insane? I said, yes. He said, hang on a minute. You're not giving away a prize for best community member on Discord every single month, are you? I said, yes. El Buccio said to me, do you not enjoy living? Obviously in a Mexican accent, which I can't do. Bobby, are you telling me that we're still giving away all this stuff completely free of charge?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
He's going to have my guts for garters, When I signed the show over to him, I didn't realise it would be so intense. Okay, well, hopefully we can navigate through that with style and aplomb. And if you've just heard all that and you're thinking, hang on a minute, I'm not on Discord. Yeah, it's free, guys. And you get a prize. Get on board. If you've not commented on the Instagram or the Twitter, what's wrong with you? It costs nothing. You get your name read out on the air. You get your comment featured either by me and Bobby or in the turn of a guest. You get to hear them respond to your question. Totally free. Unbelievable.
And we have really nice guests because no one has ever made fun of me on the show.
Perfect. Why would anyone make fun of you?
I don't know, gaming accessories. Zero clue. I say Pokemon instead of Pokemon.
Yeah, but that's become part of the law now. You've got to call them Pokemons.
Pokemon, yeah. Yeah, third grade was real rough, bro.
Yeah, we've had better shows.
Yeah.
Listen, before he wonders why we even exist as a podcast, let's not let him get out the door, okay? We've nailed it shut. He literally cannot leave at this point. So we'll turn the light on him. We might even have to feed him some of that cheese, as he called it, to get the responses that we need from him. But it's time for the feature, the meat in the unofficial controller sandwich. And we're very lucky here this week. Normally we're just dining on wafer thin ham, the value stuff that's probably only 10% pork. This week, thanks to the wonderful inclusion of Mr. Mike Rouse, we have the best we've gone to the deli counter and we've got the finest ham in this sandwich that money can buy. As always, we reached out to you guys on the socials and we've woven your thoughts into the topic and the feature. Mike, are you ready? This is your lifestyle. May I grab the red book and don my Michael Aspel mask? Yes, I killed him, hollowed out his face, and I'm wearing it as a mask. As I say, Mike Rouse, this is your life. Only joking, but let's go through this chronologically, if we may, as best we can, as your career, sir, is almost too big and accolade-filled to fit in a single show, but we'll do our level best. So without further ado, your gaming career started at the University of Portsmouth with a distinction in computer animation. From there, you got a job at PlayStation's own London studios, aka Team Soho. They were fresh off some of my favourite games. No, Mike, not Spice World. I know that's what you were thinking. But the amazing Porsche Challenge and Total NBA, aka NBA Shootout for American listeners. Now, before we dive into those questions, obviously going to university and studying computer animation, you had your mindset quite clear and firmly set on a job in the industry. What made that decision for you?
So I've always been into games. And so I had this kind of clarity of thought when I was in my early teens that all I wanted to do was be part of making video games. And so it kind of really made all my life decisions from that point on really easy. I didn't do super well at school. I spent a lot of my time in hospital. I had really bad asthma. I'm a super dyslexic person. And so there are a lot of challenges there to get into gaming. But every decision I made was with a view of, I want to get into games. So, I got a job as a secretary in a news office, and then I volunteered to work in the graphic design department on weekends for free. And then they brought me in and said, "Why do you want a job there?" And I said, "Yes." And I did that for a couple of years, and then I saw an advert for the University of Portsmouth. I was like, "Okay, I'm going to go there and see if I can get into that." My professional experience in graphic design got me into that.
Wow!
And then Sony came along, and they were looking for people to basically do a little bit of cheap labor to help them finish off their games, and I threw myself at that. I was the only one to get given an internship at the end of that. But everything I did, all my decisions from quite a young age were, I want to do this. And it made everything quite easy. It took a long time. I'm sure there's a quicker way of getting to the job that you want to do, but knowing what I wanted to do and then just making sure that the decisions I made were ones that I thought would push me in that direction are what made my kind of dream job come true.
I have to say, the motivation and dogged determination expressed by you against, at the time when you were young, obviously some of those setbacks, like you mentioned, dyslexia and your asthma and not doing terribly well at school. And I have to admit, when I was that age, I was wondering how next best to get some sneaky boost from the off license and get into, whatever XYZ's pants at the time. And you expressed almost a singular focus to really find a way to get that experience and then just get buggering on in there, didn't you? Just to keep knocking that door down, Mike, I have to say. We will go through your glittering career, but one would imagine that much focus at the start really resulted in the path that you ended up going on. So that's wonderful. Bobby, first out the mailbag, because we've had some very interesting questions. Bobby, the first question, in fact, one thing we didn't pre-warn you about, we have a thing we do when we have a new listener. I don't want to say it too loud because it might invoke it. Now, we clap and we say new listener. You can join in. Most people do. If you don't want to, that's fine. So, Bobby, who's this?
It's a new listener. His name is Stanley.Almond.
Okay.
Question for him. How did you get to work for Sony? Is there anything you would have changed about the games you helped make?
Wow, that's a big question. So I think I covered the Sony thing.
Yes.
That it was an amazing opportunity. I was supremely lucky as well to get that opportunity there. It is a rare thing to work for a big AAA company right off the bat from university. So, I was super lucky.
When you were, one thing I'd just add, when you were doing your slave labor for them, were you working on titles from the PlayStation 1 era, or was it PlayStation 2 that you were working in the sweatshop for?
So we were all PlayStation 2 at this point. The PlayStation hadn't been launched; it wasn't released. So we'd finished off on all the PS1 games.
Yeah,
and we were on to the PS2 stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
There's so much I would have changed about the games that I helped make. Probably would have put some better gameplay in the Getaway. I'll tell if we get onto the Getaway, I'll give you some fun antics about that game. I think always with these games, it's quite difficult to make them. They're hard, right? We're making everything from scratch, unlike a film where you'll have the script and there's the actors already there and the lighting's already there. We're making the lighting, we're making the actors. So, and it's, at the back of your mind, you don't want to make a bad game. You want to be something that make something that you're proud of and that other people will really enjoy. So, you always look back and you're like, I wish I could have changed that. I wish we had more time for this. I wish we had more money to do this.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with every games developer. There's always things you want to change.
One would imagine that, 2 points that you've made there, and there have been some absolute stinkers of games. And I would love to get sort of in the mindset of those people as they're releasing, because within their circle, they're probably like, this is, they're going to love this. This is going to be a belter. Then it comes out and it's like, it's bombed on the reviews and no one's buying it. What don't they get? And obviously I wonder if within the silo of building the game over the course of making it, maybe you've got good on the controls, or maybe you're kind of used to the nuances and you don't need someone to explain, because you know the inherent way that you want to play it. But that doesn't necessarily translate well to an outside experience coming in, because they haven't been there since day one. So they don't know. That often makes me wonder, because you flick through magazines, Time Memorial, even today, there's still a few going, and you see low review scores, and you're like, oh, God, that must hurt, because although it's not reviewed very well, it's taken just as long to make. Obviously some games look absolute stinkers, but it still doesn't mean that the people weren't working awfully long hours. Is that something that's ever struck you with the sort of critical reception of some games?
Yeah, and there's so many different factors that can make a game a bit of a stinker, right? It could be, there's some games I look at and you're like, that's terrible, and then you find out that the team had 3 months to make the game, because their whole business model is we make games for other people. The team didn't have the budget to do what they wanted. Or they're making something completely new, right? And there's so much opportunity for you to mess up or get something wrong when you're trying to create something new. So there's never kind of one thing that makes a game terrible. There's multiple factors that could be in there. You may not be the audience, and that's why you think it's terrible. There's a lot of people that have played games that I've made that think, well, this is terrible. But no matter how terrible a game is, there's always one person in the world that is their most favorite game ever.
Yes.
And I think for me, at least as a games developer, it's those people when they come to me and say, that changed my life. That was the thing that supported me through a bad situation. I really enjoyed playing that. That makes up for all the bad reviews you might get and the lack of sales you might get. But it's very, very, I doubt there's very few studios that are there to make terrible games, because terrible games don't sell well. But they're all limited by time, money, aspiration, talent. There's so much things that stop someone from making a great game.
Okay, well, back to your story as I turn a page in the Red Book. It's the first game you worked on, as far as I can reckon, was the This Is Football, Sony's first-party stab at cracking the market. What was that like for you as a first role? Because I believe you worked on the the characters. Well, I say
Yep.
the characters, the actual football players' faces.
Yes.
It's a lot of faces, Mike.
It is. It was a pretty challenging role as well because we were using a lot of techniques that were new. Obviously, we'd just come off of PlayStation 1 and we're now on to PlayStation 2, which was really doing textures properly and 3D properly. So there was a lot of learning curves there. And for me, I was having to paint people's faces and make them look like the footballers in real life. So, if you're going to get criticism, it's going to be that doesn't look like the football player. So there was a lot of pressure there. But it was a huge amount of fun. It was still very much old school gaming, very male dominated at that time. Lots of parties, lots of drinking, lots of long nights. And I was super young. So for me, I lapped it all up at that point. And the games industry as a whole was young. At that time, if you were in your early 30s, you were considered a veteran, an old boy of the industry, compared to today, where, if you're in your 60s or maybe even your 70s, you're considered an old boy and veteran. So, it was a very young industry back in the day there. So.
Well, one thing I think me and Bobby touched on a few shows ago, and it's the film industry as a whole really got started in sort of 1909 with feature films. And, by the 1950s, we were starting to see things that we would probably recognize and still sit and watch down today. The gaming industry started maybe in the 70s with Pong really as the first game that we would see. And if we were to sort of map that across, we are currently in the sort of mid to early 1950s as far as that journey as a medium goes. So, we're maybe 30 years away from, or 20 years away from the Star Wars moment, as I would call it, which I find quite fascinating in a way. There's so much left for the business to give. It's what a wonderful medium. Before we get too swept up in that, obviously from This Is Football, you became a vehicle artist in the much loved PS2 classic, The Getaway. Now, that was in development, I've been researching, since the PS1. Do you want to tell us about it and the sort of shape you found it in when you arrived? Because was that developing in pillar with This Is Football? So in there's the Getaway boys, they're in there doing what they do. I'm in here doing David Beckham's changed his haircut last minute, so I've got to redo his quiff or shave his head or whatever it is you're doing with David. Did you then, was it you finished up on that, or was it someone looked through the window and was like, he's pretty good at drawing, that guy?
Yeah, so it actually happened during my internship there. I really liked the look of the Getaway. So I went up there and started talking to some of the guys up there, and they said, do you want to have a go at doing some of the car wheels? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I didn't really. I was going from faces and painting textures for faces to doing, 3-spoke and 4-spoke wheels for cars. So I went on to that and I did about 2 weeks of work on that. And then I had to go back to uni, and they sent me a car to texture up. So I did that in blistering fast speed, sent that over to them, and they basically came back to me and said, do you want a full-time job now at Sony? Because we really like your stuff. And I have, I took that instantly. So I there was an opportunity to take the degree at university or go off and do work at Sony. So I took the Sony branch, and then I joined the Getaway as a car artist. And I'm super impatient. I've got almost no concentration span. So they gave me all this stuff to learn because about the application I was using for 3D modeling. And I did about 2 hours of looking at it. I was like, I'm not reading this. I'm going to go make a car now. So I made the BMW 3 Series straight away, and then just never looked back after that. It was just straight into building the cars on the Getaway.
So some of your cars, I believe you worked on the Range Rover, or the classic Range Rover that's in the game. You worked on the MR2, and you worked on some of the, as you call them, junker cars. Is there any car that kind of stood out for you as being like, yeah, I play it now and I'm like, you nailed that. Because I think you nailed the MR2, by the way. But, is there anything that stands out? Is there any one of those cars that you were like, yeah, I'm so happy about that?
I really liked doing the rubbish-looking cars and messing around there. Like the Honda Accord, I really love doing the Honda Accord. If you look at that one, you'll notice there's the religious fish icon on the back there. It's got the heat strips running through the window on the back window. I really went to town with that one. And for an artist, doing the pristine, clean shine back in those days was pretty boring because that's just a flat color.
Yeah.
Where doing the grubby cars was where, the real skill came in. You had very small textures to work with. And so trying to get this detail in was challenging to do. So really enjoyed doing those and then messing around with the physics of the car. I loved making those old cars very rolly, a bit rubbish on the brakes. So, you'd hit the brakes and they'd take them a while and they'd skid out of the back. But huge amount of fun with those older cars, just professionally, but also as a gamer, just they're the cars that you don't mind smashing up and destroying. So yeah, I think definitely those older cars were my favorite.
Well, we have a question now. I believe I've had the pleasure of Mr. Zangief's company on one of your live streams, so I believe we've brought him over. Hopefully, we can lock him in. Probably put him in a cupboard, throw away the key, feed him a small amount of cat food for a flat. But we see him as a new listener.
No.
So it's like, oh God, please no.
At Zangief at Seablood78.
I mean, what's he got to say?
I'm assuming that's yes in Spanish. I don't know. He says, Mike, what do you think is the best game to be released on the PlayStation 2? And why is it the Getaway?
Oh, that's a loaded question, surely.
Well, one would imagine he wants to hear your response. You don't have to answer the Getaway, but maybe if you do, you've got to justify why.
It's such a hard question. It's so unfair. The PlayStation 2 spawned franchises of games that we still play today, right? It just had so many fantastic games on there. I think it's difficult to kind of call your own games because you lived with those games for years, literally, and it's hard. With time, you can affectionately look back at the game that you worked on, but often you're sitting long hours. There's a lot of creative friction that goes into games. There are low points in them, and so you don't walk out of it and go, "I really want to now play the Getaway," because I've been doing it for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So it's. I wouldn't say that the Getaway was my favorite, but it's amazing to hear how many people loved that game and how many fans. And I think, for me as a games developer, that's been the thing that I've really brought away from me with the Getaway is how many people loved it and how special it was to people. As for my favorite game, I'm in my box here with cheese, and I brought a couple of choice games with me that I'm looking along the side here. Forgot the PlayStation, unfortunately, but I can look at the back of the box and reminisce at what they played like. But I really enjoyed Final Fantasy X.
Yeah.
I named my daughter after one of the characters because I enjoyed that so much. I love the Metal Gear Solid series being continued on there. Love Jack and Dexter, first, especially the original one. But there's just so many games. I mean, I have something like 400 PlayStation 2 games and love they're games that I absolutely love. Katamari Damacy. Oh, Katamari Damacy. I imported that. A fantastic game. I don't know if anyone's played that, but
that's the game where you roll things up.
Yep.
Yeah, my friend Bo, huge fan. They just dedicated a whole show on that game.
Yeah,
which I think is amazing.
Genius game, and you could only import it from Japan, so I had to figure out what all the missions were. Like some of them were collect crabs, so you'd end up playing it. But yeah, genius game. But I think just too many to pick up on the PlayStation 2. But really humbled that people, for some people, the Getaway is their favorite game on that system.
Okay, well, we've got another question about the Getaway, if we may. It's my seemingly through the law of the show adopted son, but Bobby's ginger brother. What's he got to say for himself?
He says, this is Ginger's game room. He says, is it true the harder you press X, the faster the car goes?
Do you know what? I don't know.
Well, the thing is, I included that because the PlayStation 2 developed the rather interesting idea of almost pressure-sensitive buttons. So some games, I do believe Metal Gear Solid 2 incorporated a point where you pressed the button or you held it down hard to kind of switch between scopes in a way. I don't know.
Do you know? I think it is true because I can remember you can feather the brake by changing the amount of pressure you apply to the button, but it's so long ago. My memory has faded with time, unfortunately.
Let's not let the truth get in the way of this urban myth. Let's perpetuate it.
Propagate it.
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Yes.
Next up, a fellow YouTuber, really. He's the man who makes this an 18-rated show just by asking a comment, but it's a 16-bit prick. He's done a wonderful video. He says, fantastic. I love watching his videos on YouTube, especially the Getaway ones he's done, as I have some great memories from playing this. My dad was originally from London, and we played this game together for the first time the day before we went down to Highbury to pick up the latest Arsenal strip that was coming out at the time. While driving around in the game, he would tell me the names of the areas and childhood memories he had from these areas as a youngster. I remember him being blown away by the surroundings and graphics. We'd been so used to games like GTA where the world was fictional. The Getaway was my first experience I can remember of a game being based in a real part of the world. Looking back at the game now, I feel it was far ahead of its time and really underappreciated. If it had to come out years later, it would have been a lot bigger than it was. The follow-up to the game, Black Monday, was fantastic. I'd love to see a remaster, straight remake of these two. I reckon if it came out now, polished up, it would go down a treat. There's a lot of gamers who may have missed this period in gaming, might be put off by the graphics. Sorry for the rant. I won't say it was a rant. It's a bit prick. I think it was a glowing eulogy. But my question would be, did the finished product live up to your expectations to what it was before the project began? And also, if you could go back, is there anything you could have changed or redone? I mean, you've kind of touched on that, but if there's anything else you want to say. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask the question. Looking forward to this episode. Loads of people have asked this. What's the chance of getting a signed copy of the first Getaway? One would imagine, probably not, because we've kind of kidnapped him now. So he's basically our slave. Put him in a room and get him to sign £1 copies of the Getaway. So there's plenty to unpick there. The 16 prick does videos. He's very much an under-noticed YouTuber. He does some really almost video essays, the style, and his editing is very good, to be fair. And he's done one about the Getaway, which I have thoroughly enjoyed. So he's almost like probably the Getaway, well, after Fats and Geef, one would imagine the Getaway's biggest fan. So to pick out of there, did the final product live up to your expectation as to what it was before the project began? And also if there's anything you could have changed or redone?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, it didn't. And there was a lot of friction on that team. I remember we were all in the boardroom doing a playthrough of the E3 game, and we got one of our programmers that didn't really play the game much at all to play it. And he struggled with all the controls. He struggled with everything. And I remember him, members of the team, including the game director, laughing at how he was doing.
And myself, is that Brendan?
Yes. And myself and my car partner were quite upset by this, and we kind of interrupted and we said, look, this is not great, because this is someone who hasn't played the game much at all. This is a representation of our user base, and he's having a terrible time of it, and we're laughing at it where we actually should be addressing it. I was super junior at the time, so it was a comment that got pushed to the side.
May I be as bold to say that I think I mentioned to you off air that LA Noire is one of my favourite games, and that all came out of Brendan's mind. But my understanding of following that game through development and watching some making of documentaries, Brendan's quite a harsh taskmaster, to put it politely. How did he react? And may I say to you, balls of steel, sir. How did he react to you sort of pulling him up on this? For me, that's a fascinating insight. I would have looked at the floor and just sort of coughed and scratched the back of my neck, but you found the gumption within you to say, actually, no, this is. What was his response?
I think it was very measured. He's an intelligent guy. I think he was just more flippant with his response, and pushed it to one side. Ultimately, as we were going through our mastering, we got a bug from the head of QA, and it was an A bug, and it said, "This game has no gameplay in it." Brendan's focus and his strength is storytelling. He left the dev team for maybe a month to go film an advert for the game, because that was his passion. Was he wanted to make films, he wanted to bring films into games, but I think he was just too weighted on the film side and script side of things, and it meant that for the longest time the game had lots of mechanics but actually no gameplay in it, and it only really came together in the last 3 or 4 months. So the Getaway was a technical marvel. It really was. Definitely. We were doing stuff that no one were doing. We had seamlessly streaming interiors and exteriors. I think it was the first cover-based shooter, certainly the first cover-based shooter for open world, streaming all that traffic, the people, the dialogue, the motion capture. So it was technically stunning at the time. But for
playing it recently, the texture work in it, I think, is what strikes me. I know you could look at someone would see the game now and just dismiss it out of hand, but at the time, especially on a CRT TV, the texture work, Mike, is fantastic.
Yeah, there was some great work that went into it. It was a labor of love for the team, but I think there was a large section of the team that when it came out were a little bit disappointed it wasn't more. We were in direct competition with Grand Theft Auto, so Brendan knew the guys up at Rockstar North.
Oh, right.
And we were pushing to try release before them because we knew that essentially whoever released first would the spoils would go to that victor.
Yeah.
But we were so far behind on getting the gameplay in that we ended up shipping, I think, a year after they shipped.
Yes.
And so, for the team, it was pretty hard because, we were labeled as copycats or, this is a ripoff of GTA, which was pretty far from the truth. Both those games were in competition. There was some healthy competition in there, they referenced the Getaway in GTA.
They did, didn't they?
Yeah, so it was hard to kind of swallow those kind of pills there. But I think ultimately there was a lot to be proud of on that game, especially the art team did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I think that the Getaway owes less to sort of GTA on in the PS2 era, and more to with its cover based and sort of. Like, yes, there's open world driving sections, and that would probably be where people would do the comparison from. But it feels to me like a very, very early forerunner, if I may be so bold, of something that Naughty Dog tried with the Uncharted franchise. The cover based, the health style, although probably wasn't nailed exactly to keep the gameplay flowing as it is in Uncharted, where this is something else at Rock Bobby's world. In the Uncharted games, the actual glowing red on the screen isn't you getting hit with a bullet. It's actually your luck running out, and all the other bullets miss. And then the final bullet that gets you is what kills you, which I've always found a fascinating concept. Obviously, we have the famous wall lean of Mr. Hammond there, but
we hated that. We hated that on the team. I mean, there's obviously some people that came up with it, but it was, I think, again, another first was, one of the first game, if not one of the first games that had no UI, and it was all contextual information being displayed to you, and the blood on the jacket, you see that getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's how injured you are. So I think what could have been better is just it fading over time. In number 2, we got rid of that and we just put health packs in, right? Which is what a lot of us wanted in the first one, which is these health box. But Brendan wanted it to be quite filmic. We did have the argument of, well, it's not really filmic that you lean up against the wall and recover your health.
I always wondered how that would go down as a counter argument, because it does seem like a complete... we want it to be filmic. Like, surely someone ripping a first aid kit off the wall and wrapping a bandage around their arm and, pulling tight on a bit of tape would be more filmic than, I'll just sweat these bullets out. Don't worry. I'll get to it in a minute. Just catch my breath. It's, I don't know. It swings and roundabouts. Before we, let's crack on. Next question is Spadabink's to Retro Gaming. He's messaged in and he says, I have a question. Where do I send my copy of the Getaway to get signed by at Retro Gamer Boy? Serious note, how easy would it be for the team to remaster a game like the Getaway for newer consoles? Would he be on board with a project like this that came along? Gaming controller emojis, trophy emojis, and a Union Jack flag instead of the Italian flag, which I normally do, sir, as a one-off, as the Getaway is based in London. So, one of our Italian heritage listeners. How easy would it be to remaster that game?
Technically, probably relatively easy. But as I discussed in a video I put out recently, a lot of it comes down to licensing. It's a real world city, and back then when we made the game, a lot of rules, regulations, laws, how people perceived video games were very different to nowadays. It's just the car licensing alone. In the Getaway, you can shoot people in the car, then shoot the engine so they burn inside that car. And you can imagine a manufacturer and you're saying, hey, we're going to redo this game and your cars are going to be in it. And you'll be able to kill people in those cars and burn them. So the licensing would be difficult. Obviously, London's changed a bit in that time. Some buildings have licensing on them, so if you want to have them in there, you'd have to pay for that. So it's the technology we used ordnance survey maps to make sure we got the roads system correct. You'd have to pay for ordnance survey licenses again, music licensing again. All the actors would have to have new contracts signed because it would be essentially a new game. So it's not impossible. It's just, how much does Sony want to do it? And Sony are more interested, I think, at least when I was working there, at making games that showed off what the console could do.
Yes.
And the problem with a remake like that for an HD remaster for the Getaway is that it doesn't really show off what the console can do. It's fan service. And to be honest, when we look at remakes like the Crash Bandicoot remake, Sony sold that license off. And so it was a different IP owner that was, or a different owner that was looking to make money off of Crash Bandicoot rather than Sony saying, let's remake Crash Bandicoot. So possible, but I think very unlikely. A more reasonable outcome is that they continue the series in some way.
Kind of spiritual successor, really, in Blood and Truth and the London Heist VR missions, I would say. Although, me and you talked about that last week off air, but no one from Team Soho, apart from probably the cleaner and the coffee machine repairman, really exists there anymore for that to have any sort of direct lineage, but maybe a nod to their roots, one would imagine.
Yeah, and Sony have announced they're doing a new VR headset, and the London studio probably put out one of the premium and best experiences for VR. So I would imagine that their studio is geared up to support that new headset if a new one's coming out. And
have you played Blood and Truth?
I haven't played, although I was quite excited to see it because it looked quite innovative in how it was executed.
One of, if not the best experience I've had in the PSVR. Just go for it, and it's strikingly good fun. And by the time it finished, and spoilers, you end up parachuting over London. Like there's times where it feels like a game from PS3 because of the way they have to make it work for the VR headset to utilize it, but a real fun, wonderful experience full of gameplay and fun bits, like you vape in it and all sorts of weird stuff. So it's a bigger boys game, but interesting. Bobby, reach deep into the mailbag. One feels this is another Professor Pliskin War and Peace tome. What have you got for us, sir?
He says, certainly an interesting guest you guys have on course of game debating here at the Unofficial Controller College lecturers, George and Bobby. Unfortunately, though, while I have heard all of the title Mr. Rouse has been involved in, once the Book of Spells and Wonder Book accessory, none of the titles featured are to my interest. I'm sorry, but to be respectable, one question I have for Michael is, as a fellow creative myself, I'm a writer planning out his first novel to do over the summer. How do you stay consistent in tone, mood, or style you have going for a project from this initial production and planning stages to the final product it ends up being? I say, as a comparison, I want to do a story with emphasis on humor, yet with just enough realistic and emotional moments, such as the Uncharted series or Persona 4, to make the cast more closely linked. The plenty of comedy more enjoyable, and the reflective and somber moments more impactful as a result. Won't be UC without an overly worded comment from me. Hey, George, 2 crying, laughing emojis.
So let's reach deep into that comment and pull out the questions. Maintaining emphasis and tone from original conception to completion. Is that a challenge that you find as a games developer community?
Yeah, totally. And especially as you get into the bigger AAA games, because you've got so many people that have to pull in the same direction. And they all are very individual in how they think something should be executed. So it's challenging to do. So it's challenging to do when you're a single person, when you're a team of 400, 1,000. It's even more challenging. And the way we adapt to this in the games industry is that we have leadership in each area. So we have the lead artist, lead designer, lead audio engineer, lead audio designer. And those people work with the game director, and that smaller group work on tone and consistency. And they're always reviewing it. And then they'll go back to their teams, and then they'll work with their teams on helping deliver that. And each one of these subdivisions will have a producer, and the producer is there to make sure consistency is maintained as well, and quality is maintained, as well as the normal things from producers, scheduling and looking after stuff. And so that lead, what we do is we pair leads and producers together, and together they help maintain and critique the work to ensure that it's always consistent. We often have playthroughs weekly of the game to make sure it's all the same. The game director will be doing it. Ultimately, the game director will have the vision, but he is not the whole sole vision holder, or she is not the sole vision holder. They will have a number of people that will play into the decision making there, but they'll review it. They review it as a leads team. They play the games, and then they come back with changes. They may say, "Hey, look, this is tonally off. We need to go back and change this." So the development cycle is constantly review, feedback, change, review, feedback, change. And one of the biggest advantages, or one of the biggest opportunities, is also the biggest threat, and that is we do review the work constantly, and it's an advantage because you're always trying to make things better. And it's a threat because you could just get stuck in that phase and not move on as you're trying to seek out perfection. So it's every team does it differently. We have some teams that have people that lead from the front. Dave Jaffe with God of War, a very dominant personality. This is how we're going to do it, and this is the only way we're going to do it.
Right.
Other teams are more open, and they're like, we want the experience of the team to come through this. The teams like Assassin's Creed's teams are much more like that. So everyone does it differently, but we have a structure in place that ensures that tone and quality is persistent throughout the game.
Amazing. It's almost like the film industry have their dailies where they check through the scenes. That I find that fascinating. I mean, the early days of the dailies for a video game must look very broken. A guy just sort of skating across to an area and then kind of flicking his arms, and the shoot mechanics just being very sort of bolted on. Is there a sense of joy when you do you ever keep like week 1 dailies, as I've just termed them, and then look at them in week 52 and go, look how far we've come? Or is it just such a natural evolution that you've kind of forgotten Skater Man?
Yeah, we absolutely do that, but different teams do it in different ways. Some teams use it as a barometer for like, how well have we done and where are we now? Other teams use it for just interest. Look, this is where we were and this is where we are now. Those are actually some of my favorite parts of development, is when we look back at what the game looked like. So a game I recently worked on, an open world city, we looked back at what the city looked like, and it was grey textures, boxes, and then we looked at it about 2 months from launch, and it was one of the most glorious 3D cities I think that has been created for a console game. So it's, from that perspective, it's a big morale booster. But we also do use it as a tool to look back at where we are, to make sure that we're still on pace for where we were. And if we're not, what made us make those changes in the game? If it's changed a lot, have we lost our way? Or actually, is this an evolution of where we were, which is often the case when you're making a new game.
Okay. On a slightly different tack, we just haven't left the gravitational pull of the Getaway, sadly. Mr. C, he says, Getaway was a superb game. Question for Mike. There was a mission set in an art gallery that has some great modern automotive art. Who was the artist? I'd love to get a print to hang on the wall.
I have no idea.
Great question. And he's absolutely right. I think he was a big fan of the artwork within there. He works in the motor industry, does Mr. C. And I think that art area has stuck in his mind for a great deal of time. Yeah,
I think... I can't even remember the artworks on the wall. So, great job for remembering that. Some of the artwork in that came from the team. Mm-hmm. A little bit of it was licensed, but the team would have probably drawn a lot of that.
He probably just sort of scanned in some conceptual art that they were maybe doing for the game, right?
Yeah.
Really, to combine a few things here. The Gaming Gram, he's a new listener, as is JStack 600. He's had a clap. Mike wants to do it. Let's give him one. New listener. And Hammerboy 67. They're all clamoring, and I think we've kind of covered this off. But when will a new version be released? Before we move on, obviously the reference Gangs of London there. That's the PSP game. You weren't directly involved with that, but they went into the Hurt Locker and pulled out some of your car models, I believe. Gangs of London, not aged particularly well on the PSP. Sold a little bit off the hype wagon of the Getaway. Sadly, not living up to that hype, sadly. Moving that to one side. Obviously, we don't know if a new version is going to get released. I think we would say the spiritual successor is the Blood and Truth and whatever that they're cranking out for VR now. If you want your jelly deals and all that sort of jazz, that's where you got to go. Back to your story, Mike. working at Team Soho, you also worked on the Getaway sequel. How did that compare to the previous game?
It was a lot better. I think Brendan had moved on, and Naz took over. Naz was our lead engineer, our lead coder from the last game. And it was a little bit more of a cooperative game development. Earlier I talked about the Jay Jaffes of the world. Brendan was definitely one of those who has a vision, and the team followed that. And Naz was more open to ideas. And so I found myself having a bigger role in the team. My partner who made the cars with me went off to join Brendan on Team Bondi as a lead artist. And so I took over that car department. And I had a lot of views on how I thought some of the exterior gameplay should go. So I also took on some of the exterior missions and helping design some of those exterior missions where there were car chases.
Oh, wow.
And there's one particular car chase where you go down an alleyway, and there's 2 levels you can go up, and there's destructible objects that you can smash through.
Yeah.
That I put together, which we just wanted to make some of the car chases a little bit more exciting than they were in the Getaway. And we'd improve things like physics. So in the Getaway 1, if you hit a railing, you'll just stop.
Yes.
Whereas in Black Monday, they go flying all over the place, which made it a little bit easier.
One thing I've always found quite odd between the Getaway and the Black Mondays, the Black Monday sort of adopted a more GTA style controller map, and also the shooting section had lock-ons, and you also had camera mapped to the right stick this time. And to someone who's grown with gaming and plays modern systems as well, the Black Monday feels like just much more of a coherent experience. What went? I don't understand what went wrong. Did the critics expect more? Even the Metacritic is seemingly low for the game. I just never been able to work out the I can't weigh it up. Like, it is a more friendly experience than the really harsh, abrupt Getaway original.
I think people wanted more. There was also some backlash. A lot of people, I think there's some press that were hoping the original Getaway would be more. It's difficult. It's difficult to tell, and often there's a lot of people that, regardless of how bad the first one was, they'll hold that one quite close to them as as being canon, even down to mechanics. But we made a lot of changes, and we were inspired by GTA. And that's where a lot of those changes came from. And likewise, the GTA team were inspired by the Getaway. So they introduced cover mechanics into Vice City. Yeah. A lot of the work that we'd done on cars and the damage in Getaway 1, they brought onto GTA Vice City. So there was a number of things that, both teams were feeding off each other. Both teams were in new ground, new territory. These 2 games were the first of their kind. And so, we learnt off of each other on how to make improvements to our game. So, yeah, I think the Getaway Black Monday was a more solid experience. We had a lot of work that was already done. We didn't have to rebuild the city. We edited and changed stuff. And so that extra time went into making the game better. The cars, I redid entirely how the damage system works on the cars. There's side damage that we did where I created this texture that looks 3D, and as you bump against it, the damage and scratches slowly fade in. And it's actually a technique that they brought into 24 the game, which was one of our sister studios was making.
That is a much overlooked game, if I might say. That actually is one of the rare PS2 PAL games that will track into 480p progressive scan. Yeah, it looks great. So that piece of nugget of information I find absolutely amazing. Yes, it's aged, but much like the Getaway, there's something in there to love. So to know that your creative juices have seeped into Jack Bauer's digital escapade, it brings me much joy, Mike. Referring back to this red book of your life, your next experience with the PlayStation brand involved working on the much-loved and sadly missed PlayStation Home. You were also involved in the making of PlayStation Trophies. PlayStation Trophies without those, our co-host, Bobby, would have no reason to even draw breath. The man's obsessed. He's got more of those than I've had hot dinners. And I can tell you one thing, Mike, I'm a hot dinner lover. So, PlayStation Home. There's a little story there. It began on PlayStation 2 development kits, did it not?
It absolutely did. In fact, it is something we talk about as new and groundbreaking. The reality is we didn't want to lose our jobs. And so the game we were working on that got cancelled, which was the Getaway Online, we quickly mustered together a proposition for how we could turn that into an. So it was born out of necessity for money to feed our families. PlayStation Home, and essentially it is the online elements of the Getaway Online's community, and the Getaway Online was this vision of being able to go out into an open world city with other players. You'd go to these hubs, you'd play mini games together, you'd plan heists, then you'd go out into the open world again and do these heists.
A PlayStation 2 broadband adapter game.
Yes.
Yep. I tell you what, the boys at Team London, aka Team Soho, they had ambitions that were stratospheric, sir. I can't even begin to. The best we got was what? SOCOM? And you would envisage something there that would be unparalleled even into the PS3 era. Bold.
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, the adapter didn't sell too well. And Sony's online service wasn't too good. So that saw the brakes pulled on that. But we very quickly put together a demo where you started off in the city and you could drive your car, and then you drove through a forest, I think, and then you got to a boat, and you could get on the boat and you could go to a desert island, and on that desert island there was like a guy dressed up as an American football player dancing, and we had another, but basically we'd created this. We wanted to show that we could create a hub, a social hub for gamers in 3D. And so we went in and we showed people what they were expecting, which was like a London pub in London. And then we took them on this journey where we went through this city changing into to a desert island eventually, and all the way through it you had different people dressed up in different costumes. We had a Red Indian. I think at one point we almost had village people on this beach, and then from there you went off and you did a personal apartment. So you went into a personal apartment and you could decorate it, and you could put down a TV and put down furniture, and you could customize your character. And the sales pitch was, hey, we want to build a virtual online community for the PlayStation 3. It didn't get any traction to start with, and we were humored. We were like, okay, well, you're a small team of like 10 guys. We'll give you a PlayStation 3 development kit, see what you can do. We were the last team in Sony to get a PlayStation development kit. I used to go down into the basement and get old keyboards and try put them together, because we needed keyboards for typing text chat. So we didn't have enough keyboards, so I'd go down to the rubbish bin and put keyboards together so that we could do this text chat stuff. And we got to a point where we had a demo where we could show off this online community. You could join, you could chat to people, you could go off and play mini games. And from that point, we then put together a business case of, look, what we want to do is make this community, but then sell items to people and be able to launch into games. So this is a hub where people came to. And that's in fact what we called it to start off with. It was PlayStation Hub. We took that over to Japan, and Phil Harrison was pretty much the guy who helped me and the lead artist and the art director, the engineer director, get the game off the ground, because he took it over and he sold it into Japan.
Wow.
And they were super excited by it, because at the time the head of Sony was in love with the Matrix, and he wanted to create the Matrix where people had these virtual lives they lived out on the console. And for him, PlayStation Home was this: dress up, become who you want, and go live in the console. And it was awesome. There was a lot of things that came out of PlayStation Home that people don't realize. Like the friends list was only ever going to be 50 players that you could be on your friends list, because Sony were like, well, who knows more than 50 people? PlayStation Home, within its first week, people were making friends with each other. And so suddenly they were like, we have to change this. We had voice comms. And actually the day we went live with the beta of PlayStation Home, it brought down the whole of PlayStation 3's network because people were using voice comms to chat, and it was too much for the system. So off of that, Sony built a better infrastructure to cope with voice comms.
Unbelievable.
So there's a lot that PlayStation Home brought in there, like a lot of microtransactions, being able to buy micro games. All that came from PlayStation Home. It was just one of those. It was a great service to build on. We aimed at first for hardcore gamers, but it actually came a service for secondary gamers, people that didn't necessarily play lots of games. So, one of the big features that I'd come up with early on was you could launch into brand new games or launch into other games from PlayStation Home. That failed miserably. Right. Very few people did that. But what we did find is the community aspect of it, people loved. We had a whole community of people where they were service people in the US Army, and it was their families who would meet up on PlayStation Home to socialize, to share in the anxiety they had about their loved ones being overseas in the military. And so we had, lots of different groups coming up on PlayStation Home, and it really did become an online community. It didn't become the hardcore gamers online community, but it was a community for PlayStation users there. We even had a community of 30 plus old gentlemen who liked dressing up in French maids' outfits and doing synchronized dancing. And I think this got so popular that there were 2 or 3 gangs of 30-year-old men dressing up in French maids' outfits, having dance-offs, and they were perfectly synchronized. They'd got all these dance moves down.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So
now, the console I play, I've got a PS5. Luckily, Bobby and I both secured PlayStation 5s on launch. Mine's barely been turned on. I've played through Spider-Man and some other of the games that I wanted to play, but I keep coming back to the PS3. Now, as part of this, you'll see where I'm going with this. I recently thought, do you know what? I don't think I've seen every Sony E3 from 2005, which was basically the announcement the PlayStation 3 was coming through, until the PlayStation 3 was discontinued and the E3 was mainly about PS4. One of the things that stuck out to me was that in their inclusion of PlayStation Home, they built a replica of their E3 stands that you could visit in Home. Now, were you involved in that? And if so, what did you get? The tech sheets that they sent the designers to build the MDF out of for the show floor, and then you created a digital version?
Yeah. So events were myself and another designer's idea of how we could get things happening in PlayStation Home.
That was you.
To start off with, beautiful. We built it around a movie cinema, a movie theater, and we would have events in there. So we had like a Ratchet and Clank launch trailer event. So that was the start of it. And then we wanted to do E3. And I think the first E3 environment we built wasn't a replica of E3. It was an imagination where we had all the things that were being announced at E3 unlocking as the days went on.
Yeah.
And eventually it became a mapping of E3. But it was exactly that. They would build up what the stage would be, and then 2 documents would go off. One would come to our team, and one would go off to the team at E3 to build it. By this point, I was running the development team on PlayStation Home. And we had teams across the world making content for us. So I was up almost 24 hours because I had the Greater Eastern Territory teams like Japan and Korea. I had the US online, and I'd just be awake with my phone with the different feature requests or problems they'd have constantly. So it was a tiring time. But that having E3 in PlayStation Home would always see a bump. Because it was almost better than just watching it on IGN at the time or GameSpot. You could go in there, chat with people, watch the events going live, but also kind of get to see what E3 was like.
That's
awesome.
Again, we could do a whole show where we just discuss that era of PlayStation, probably much to the annoyance of the Xbox listeners. But we're going to get to a section where we include those. But Mike, we'd love to have you back on, because these details that you just sort of throw out carte blanche, I'm sure ourselves and our listeners are like, oh, I'd love to know more about that. Or, I wish you could deep dive, who was first, the MDF version or Mike's version of the E3 stand, or, we know that you've been backstage at E3 during the infamous Ridge Racer comment for the PSP and other events. So I would, again, time willing, and if you actually survive this first encounter with the Unofficial Controller podcast and don't run a mile, we would love to have you back on to maybe deep dive some of these things a little bit more. But we're trying to cover a great wealth of gaming accolades, sir, if I may be so bold. Now, this is where Bobby's going to probably cover himself in Vaseline and lose himself. But PlayStation trophies, this is also an accolade that can be attributed to you directly, or is this just from a graphic design point of view? Tell us the story there.
So we were looking at doing something called 3D trophies in PlayStation Home. And basically is the idea we had... and I've forgotten where the idea came from, but essentially you could collect 3D objects from doing things in home. Then the Xbox 360 was launched with its achievement system. And we were like, oh, this is good. Maybe we could do something along the lines of the achievements. And so Phil Harrison asked one of the designers who was under my stewardship to come up with a design. And basically what came back, what hit my plate was this document. It was very well done, but it was just the achievement system and how we would copy that system. Being a gamer my whole life, I looked at this and I was like, I really enjoy the achievement system, but I really hate aspects of it. And it doesn't fit with what I would want. And so, not to take away what the designer had done, which was a fantastic job, a guy named Brad did a fantastic job with that initial design. I went away and put together a proposal of what I thought a system would be. And I called it the trophy system. And what I wanted to do was to create a system where people could not just look at a score and see how good a gamer was, or if they had the same interests as you, but you could look at it and go, wow, this person's got 50 trophies, but they're all bronze, so they're more of a casual gamer, or they've got all golds, so they're a more of a hardcore gamer. And so I wanted to build a system that had a ton of granularity in there. My initial design also had in there that you could get trophies for trophies. So there were milestone trophies that you could get.
Oh, wow.
So if you hit 100 golds, there'd be a trophy for that. If you were the first person in a game to get a trophy, there was a trophy for that. And so my original design had this huge network of ways where you could show your passion for games through the trophy system. You could follow certain trophy winners and see how they were doing, and they could give you advice on how they were doing, just like, this is how I did this trophy. So that went off to Phil Harrison. He loved the idea. It went off to Japan. And then Phil was over in Japan and he was asking me for revisions on my presentation. So I did that. He was like, can you send me what it would look like? I went online and I got some trophies and I redrew them.
Wow.
and kind of sent that over to him. And they're very similar to the trophies that we have now in the system. And they really liked it, and they lapped that up. At this point, the Platinum Trophy didn't exist, and it went off to the RHQs, our regional headquarters teams in each location, and they were asked for feedback on it. The only feedback we really got was that they wanted a new trophy, which was once you got all of the trophies, you would get this new trophy. And they called it the Grand Slam Trophy. It was an idea that came from the States. And we were a bit about this. At this point, we'd got approval for it. So I was like, brilliant. I've come up with this system. I handed this off to another talented designer called Eamon. And he would design all the metrics behind how you would get these trophies. And he came and he saw this Grand Slam trophy, and I think he had an allergic reaction to it. And he's like, why doesn't it just stay with the narrative theme that Mike's created? Why is it not a platinum trophy? And so he came up with the idea for naming it platinum trophies. And then after that, it was done. It dusted, and we rolled it out. One of the things I was hoping that trophies would do is that it would build a community. Obviously, I'd just done PlayStation Home, and so a community of people would be built around this. And I also wanted it as a way for games developers to add little rewards as people were playing games. And that's the whole idea of the trophy system of if you do something in the game that you'd expected to do, you get a bronze one. So whilst you haven't finished the game and got that instant gratification, getting a bronze trophy gave you a little bump, a little high of, I got a trophy. The gold ones were then, okay, I've done something that is very hard to do in the game. And so you would be rewarded for that. Not just the reward you feel for doing it, but having this kind of thing come up on screen saying you're recognized as being someone that's done something that is hard to do. And the hope was that games could add these mini rewards that keep people engaged with the game that they were playing.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways for me of trophies is the fact that back in the day, you could blitz through a game, PS2 era, and not see everything. You didn't see the texture underneath the wheelie bin in the back of the alley in Getaway because you weren't particularly interested in looking there. But within the game narrative and other bits and bobs, and when you revisit on New Games Plus, trophies are a great way of getting you to see, of a developer to say, come and have a look at this. We spent hours on this mechanic, almost get bored senseless of it, but for your reward, here's a gold trophy. And I think that, and Xbox achievements in the same way have allowed developers to really draw attention to, we're actually quite proud of this, or we think you'll enjoy this subsystem. So, and then more to your point of creating a community. Obviously, my co-host here, he loves it. He's in constant communication with people about platinums. I think, his eyes were like saucers when you said that the first XYZ, or you get to 80 trophies, you get another trophy, and that's an elite trophy for the elite of the elite of the elite. He's probably going to go to bed tonight dreaming of what would have been possible if that had actually been stitched into the very framework of the system. Right? But once again, you're a very humble man, because every story you tell us just bumps you up. You're like Tubalo Miyamoto right now for me. Some of the things that you've been involved in. You are very humble. These things are, they really are accolades. And in 30, 40, 50 years' time, people will look back and say, oh, PlayStation, they copied Microsoft and whatever. But there are other elements to it. And to actually be the person on the ground with a pencil in his hand that was responsible in any way for the creation of trophies, and in a big way that you were, and PlayStation Home, which I think you do recognise that PlayStation Home was big and it existed within its own bubble at the time. And as time moves on, it will be forgotten. But I don't think PlayStation forget, because on PlayStation 5, obviously, Astrobot is the included packing game, which is fantastic. And obviously, when you get your PlayStation 5, I implore you to play it, because for you, I almost demand a video of this. Because for you, it will be a pure trip down memory lane with the peripherals. And there's a little PlayStation Home icon that actually unlocks a trophy as you walk through the actual outline of the logo. Oh, yes.
Brilliant.
Yes. And trophies are very much kind of championed within that as well. So they've kind of been laid down within the lore of the franchise. And I think, guilty by association, sir, if I may be so bold, I think you should be suitably proud. From that suitably proud, puffed out chest moment, I mean, you're probably equally as proud of this, but SingStar beckoned. It was a shift up. Really, you became quite heavily involved in the creation of this, in the UI, one would imagine. And just to sort of put some parenthesis on there before we let the leash off of you and you tell us all about SingStar. Sony made money from SingStar that bolstered the PlayStation exclusives that were developed in and around that time. I think we're a little bit out of sync because obviously SingStar was on PS2 as well. But if you could just elaborate on that as best you can, sir.
Yeah, so SingStar was also made in London studio. It was, I think it was the floor below. It was the floor above PlayStation Home. PlayStation Home was getting huge, and SingStar were looking at building out a community on the PlayStation 3, and they were looking for someone to help lead that. And so I decided at that point, PlayStation was out, Home was out. I'd seen it through multiple updates now, and I wanted an opportunity to do other things and learn new things. And SingStar was a powerhouse on the PS2 and looked like it was going to be a powerhouse on the PS3. So there's a lot I wanted to learn from that. And with it being London studio, you're not really leaving because you all meet up at lunchtime as you go up in the lift. So you never left anything really behind. So I joined SingStar as it was going on to PlayStation 3. Made a lot of changes on that. Some of the biggest ones were they had two products that were lingering called PlayStation Dance and PlayStation Guitar. And I really wanted to push those games out, not because I thought they'd be great, but I thought as a team we could learn something from it and build out different products based on the SingStar license. For the most part, it was an awesome group of people that loved music, that loved a gaming community. And so a lot of it was improving the features that we had and looking at how we could take SingStar in new directions. And from that, myself and the game director at the time, we had a chat and we thought we could bring to bear some of the experience at PlayStation Home, and we would build out SingStar Online, where you could also get SingStar directly downloaded already to your PS3. So all PS3s would have SingStar, just like PlayStation Home.
Yes.
So I didn't oversee that in the end because I went on to another project, which we might talk about. But we set off another producer working on that. But before that, we released SingStar Guitar and SingStar Dance, as well as a ton of other SingStars. It was almost like a conveyor belt of SingStars that were coming off.
I did a picture this week for the Instagram, and I opened one of the. I've got drawers, rammels, stuff as much as you have. Probably not as much as you have, but certain games, I'll pull open a drawer and it'll just spring out SingStar everywhere. And I'm like, I see one, I have to pick it up. They're normally 25, 50p. So you end up with like everything. I've even got SingStar Take That, would you believe? I don't know.
Pleasure.
Guilty pleasure. Yes. Well, but all this tap that's accumulated in my drawer, ultimately when it was first sold at retail, this ended up really generating a lot of cash income. And you've got a wonderful story about what happened to that cash income, Mike.
Yeah. So SingStar was huge in Europe. Europeans like getting in front of a TV and making idiots of themselves and laughing about it. It did okay in the States, but the States was more aspirational when it came to that kind of stuff. It was, the audience there wanted, people were interested in building careers out of this.
Wow.
And using that as hey, I want to be a professional singer. This can help me. Which meant it didn't sell that well in the States, but in Europe, it helped it become, I think, one of the first $1 billion selling games. And what happens with this money for Sony is they reinvest that into other games. And so when you look, it got a lot of flack, SingStar, from the hardcore gamer community. But what a lot of them don't really realize is that when they're playing games like God of War or Uncharted or Jak and Dexter, a large amount at that time of money was coming from SingStar. Now, we had other big hits out there. We had Gran Turismo, but Polyphony keep all that money. They kind of need it for their licensing and stuff.
Yeah.
But with SingStar, the costs of developing the game were insignificant to the amount of revenue it was generating. And so, a large amount of this, some of it probably even made its way into research and development. And it really helped Sony propel itself with its first party IPs, which it's known for now. When you compare it to something like Xbox studios, who shrunk then grow then shrunk then grow again, PlayStation have been consistent, and their first party studios regularly put out now massive hits. And I mean, personally, I really think that if SingStar hadn't been around, that Sony wouldn't have had the cash available for them to be able to invest in some of the biggest IPs that we have today.
Again, this to you just a mere anecdote, to our listeners and to us, fascinating insight into the industry. With that being said, couple of questions, Bobby. Out the post bag, who's next? Oh, get your clapping hands ready. It's a new listener.
Yes, sir.
It's deep_C_doodles. Just got flashbacks from singing Toxic by Britney Spears on SingStar when I was like 9 or 10 at my birthday party. I think that was one of the very few games, if not the only game, where the more terrible you are, the more fun multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. Looks like we've got the Italian Stallions back in the seat. It's bada bing, still retro gaming. First time I'm disappointed I don't see a StingStar Motown in this photo, George. I refer to your Instagram page. My question is, how easy is it to get a license from a music producer, artist, or record companies? And did he ever get to meet any of the musicians? Everybody stand for the Italian national anthem, sir? Everybody sit down. Controller emoji, sir. And trophy emoji, sir. So Mike's like, oh my God. Did you ever get to meet, how hard was it or easy was it to get the licenses? Was everyone up for it? And then secondly, did you get to meet any of the music businesses heavy hitters?
So no, we never got to meet the music industry. No, Simon Cowell.
Wow.
Pitched to him. Was it Britain's Got Talent thing to him, maybe?
Yeah.
So we pitched to him.
What was he like, just as a quick insight? What was he like as a business engagement?
He just smokes. Just like a chimney. Yeah, walk into his office and he was just puffing away, chain smoking. Wow. It was, someone with severe asthma. I was sitting there going, so it wasn't the most pleasant time of my life.
No.
But we didn't really get to meet people because it's all about money at that point. And what happens in licensing is they say, we want an advance. So you don't necessarily pay them for every copy of game that's sold. You pay them advance. So we say, look, we think this is going to sell about 10,000 copies. So we'll give you X amount for that many sales. And if it sells more than that, brilliant. If it sells less than that, oh dear. So that's generally how that licensing works there is you go off and you ask people. 9 times out of 10, they will be happy to take your money. But there are some artists like Usher. He would only license one song to any one game at a time. You couldn't have multiples. We managed to get around that in a game we made called Dance Star, where I think we got 3 of his songs on there. And so you have some peculiar things that may come from artists, like they don't want to be depicted in certain ways, or they don't want to be on a disc with another artist.
Oh, wow.
So that would be a more common one, where you'd have artists that didn't want to be on soundtracks with other ones. Sometimes it was an actual rivalry, and sometimes it would be the music licensor who didn't see a strategic advantage on having those 2 artists on the same disc.
Interesting. So the Italian Stanley actually posed a good question there. So apologies for the lack of the Motown, I would say. From the success of SingStar, your career moved on within Sony one last time, from what we can work out, to another peripheral based on Sony's Move, the camera, and an exciting innovation called Wonderbook. Now, as I referred to at the start of the show, earlier in the feature, I've watched all of the Sony E3s, and there was a moment where Harry Potter Book of Spells was showcased on stage live. Incredibly brave, and at points a little bit broken, if I may be so bold, Mike. Were you heart in mouth? First of all, question about that as this was happening.
Yes. Oh yes, I was in the crowd for that one,
right?
Because all the E3s that I've done, I'm always backstage, and I never get to go to E3. In fact, I still haven't walked around E3 ever. But I was in the crowd, and Tara, who was running art at London Studio at that time, was where it happened. And essentially what was happening was there was a floodlight that someone hadn't switched off shining onto the Move controller, which obviously the Move works on seeing where the light is.
Yes.
So the camera couldn't pick this up. And I was like, oh God, someone switch off that light, switch off that light, switch off that. And, foul language followed underneath my breath as she was. Eventually, they didn't switch off the light, but the camera managed to pick it up, and she worked her way through it. But it was a nerve-wracking time. At Sony, we had a mandate to make sure we did live demos, especially after we'd done our first PlayStation 3 E3, where we showed video concepts, but didn't really tell people they were video concepts. There was a big backlash off of that. And so, for us as Sony, it was really important that we showed actual footage and people actually playing the game. If you look at all those E3s, always someone out on stage, always someone playing it. And that was a direct result of that.
For some of our younger listeners, you refer to the sort of infamous, I think it was 2006 E3, where Killzone and Motorstorm came out and looked unbelievable, to say the least. And the no one really knew what the PS3 was going to be capable of at that time. So obviously, when Sony put something like that out, there's the thought that, my God, this cell CPU actually has got some grunt. Is that? I don't think it was fooling many people at the time, but obviously they fell foul of it. Fair play to Guerrilla, I believe it is, because that Killzone experience was almost replicated in game.
Yep.
And fair play to, is it Avalanche from memory serves? No, it wasn't. But the Motorstorm boys, because there are sections within the first Motorstorm where it's very bland textures, but there are moments where you're deep in the actual ruts and valleys in the first person mode. And that is not far away from the tone poem, as I want to call it, that we saw in E3. So although it never quite got to those lofty heights, pretty close, but their gumption, or Sony's gumption at the time, to display these videos put basically iron spike up your back and forced you to demo Wonderbook.
Yes.
Live on stage.
Live on stage. That was probably my most favorite E3 as well. It was my most favorite because I did a lot of demoing 24/7, up early, leaving late, demoing the game to buyers, to press. And something that they do at E3, which I had no idea about, and I don't think many people do know about, is that Nintendo and Sony do tours of each other's booths. So they've done a deal basically where Miyamoto will walk around and he'll get presented the games that Sony are demoing, and whoever is in charge at Sony at the time will get the same in the Nintendo booths. And I was demoing with a good friend of mine, a great friend of mine. He's been a colleague and my art director for my entire time at Sony and Microsoft. And we were both there on Wonderbook, me as the dev director, him as the art director. And I think demoed to Mums of America, the game, and I was just resetting everything up again. And he tapped me on the back. He said, "Mike, you might want to do this one." I was like, "Oh, come on, John. Who is it?" And then Miyamoto sat down. I was like, "Oh, Miyamoto, son." I'm a massive fan of Zelda and all of that he's done. And he sat down, and I took him through the game that I was making, and it was one of the most amazing things of my career is being able to demo that to me, something I'd never thought I'd do, get that to demo that. And then in the afternoon, Reggie came along and demoed it to Reggie. So it was an awesome E3 just because of those two events that happened.
How was his reaction, Miyamoto-san? Because I don't think he's a native English speaker. Everything, I think, time I've seen him through translation. So did he have to articulate to you through a translator, or did he just nod and smile as you wafted the digital wand around?
So he is, I think he's pretty fluent. But the thing is about Japanese is they don't want to look foolish or stupid and get wrong pronunciation. So he had a translator with them, but he heard everything. He understood everything I was saying. He was really excited by what we did with Wonderbook and how intuitive it was. I told him the story of when I brought Wonderbook home and I put it in front of my 2-year-old daughter. She could instantly play it because it involved turning pages. And it's one of the most simplest interactions we have as humans is books and being able to turn a page. Considering the kind of games he likes making, I think the idea caught his imagination. I showed him the dragon climbing on the page and then flying out into the world, and us seeing that. I think he really liked that. And I like to think it is probably completely untrue, but I like to think that Mario Live kart game was inspired all those years ago by Wonderbook.
Don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, Mike. Let's say that's exactly what happened. They just couldn't work out how to do it. Yeah. So just to set it straight in the chronology, was it somewhere within Sony they came to you with this book and said, "What do you think to this?" Or was it something that generated out of Team London where you said, "Actually, do you know what? The camera could work with this if we have like almost these barcode references." What chicken or egg story really, Mike? What came first?
So we had an R&D team in London. And London has the main R&D team for the shared development kit that Sony uses. And one of the things they were working on was camera tracking. And so the team had already been in place for about 2 years, but it was going nowhere. And they couldn't figure out what to do with this, how to structure it, how to make it work. The tech was making advancements, but the game team weren't. And so actually, myself and the game director on SingStar, because we constantly delivered for this studio. I'd done PlayStation Home trophies, SingStar. We'd built up this reputation of being able to bring games to market, and so we were brought in to essentially bring these games to market. And we made some big changes. One of the big changes I made was the boss fights, the end of level fights weren't very well structured. And so actually I adapted something from TV, and I said, I want us to wrap a prototype and I want us to do storyboards, because this game can be storyboarded. And so we actually designed the game through storyboards rather than through documents.
Right.
Which was great, because we could then hand that off to JK and her representatives, and they could really understand what it is we were trying to create. But the tech came first, then the game, and the game then languished, was about to be cancelled. And then we came along. I had to do a business plan, and I came back with a proposition for multiple games to be made by different people. They really bought into that. And there was this whole idea that there'd be an online bookstore as well, where you could download new books. So I was the development director, the franchise director, looking after all these different games. And then I also was a game director on a game that got cancelled, unfortunately, for Wonderbook, which was called Storyteller. And what Storyteller was, is it used AI to allow children and people to create their own stories. And so what you would do is you would put down a character, and you could control this character on the book, and you could see them running around. You could then put down a tree, and the code would know that a tree's there, so you'd bump into the tree. But you could then put down an axe. And if you put down the axe, you could say, right, I want my character to go over to the axe, pick up the axe, and then chop down the tree. And you could record this, so you could tell your own stories. And so it was like a little bit like a Little Big Planet, but for Wonderbook.
That was what I was going to say. I mean, that sounds really cool. That got canned, though, probably because
that got canned.
Sadly, my kids, as you described, your daughter's experience with Wonderbook, thoroughly enjoyed. They're Harry Potter fans, obviously, and they thoroughly enjoyed their experience playing through the first two. Correct me if I misheard you. The only one I haven't played, by the way, is Walking with Dinosaurs. But you were a director on the other four of the four Wonderbooks that were released. You were sort of on the periphery, because I must say that Diggs Nightcrawler is the hidden gem of the Wonderbook franchise. And, you know, to me, that Harry Potter's all well and good, and it's got the franchise to leverage off, and there are some interesting experiences. I like the way that it kind of transposes the image of you back. It can actually scale it back perspective-wise and make it actually work quite well when you go into the tests for the spells, which I've always found quite interesting. And if you get the room lit right, it works flawlessly every time. If you haven't got quite the light writing, sometimes there's some of those sort of motion control issues creep in. But Diggs Nightcrawler, my goodness gracious me, what a great little experience that is. And the way it kind of moves around its environments, they thoroughly enjoyed watching that one. And I climbed down on the sofa and had involvement in that too. Yeah. Was that just sort of you looking over and going, yeah, making a good game there? Or were you more sort of directly involved with that one?
So that was made in London studio as well. And for me, I was a lot more on the business side of things and then reviewing the game as it was being done. So what we did there is we approached a couple of creatives that had set up their own studio. They'd come from Pixar, and they'd had a successful game before that on iOS. And we wanted to bring that narrative strength they had and pair it with the technical strength that we had in the studio. Yeah. And that's where that was born. But off of that, there was a whole idea of different books that would come from Diggs Nightcrawler. And that's a lot of what I was mapping out was, hey, this is where the online store comes in. And there's a whole universe that Diggs Nightcrawler is involved in. And you can go to this hub where you would see all these books and you could choose a new book to read and you'd put that down, you could play that. But, you know, there's the problem with Wonderbook is that is very hard to make games with augmented reality. You know, I think to this day, Wonderbook is still probably the biggest, and it's just hard to engage with. It's more novelty-like, and that's why you see with Microsoft's HoloLens, it hasn't been really used for games because it's not engaging enough. When you look at Pokemon Go, where they're augmented, you don't really care that it's augmented in the world. You want to do the battles and you move around, right? And a lot of people mistook that augmented reality as the key thing when it really wasn't.
To that end, we had a question from I think, Soren, you've had some interaction with through social media space. Retro Gamer Thomas, he said, when working on Wonderbook, is it much different working on a game with motion controllers than a standard game with a controller? I think you've covered some of this off. And again, with this one, I would imagine it's quite difficult with developing a game that uses a camera to project an image. And you kind of alluded to it there. As you say, these AR games, they look great on paper, and I'm sure in tech demos and bits and bobs, they are amazing. And your first playthrough, especially at the time when they first released, these were hot.
Yeah.
But it didn't just find the traction in the marketplace, sadly. Do you think there's other than the reasons you just gave, is there anything else that kind of held these titles back?
Yeah, I mean, and we discussed this while we were developing the game. The barrier to entry was huge on those games. Usually the barrier to entry is money and the console. If I've got money in the console, I can play the game. With this, you needed the PlayStation camera, you needed the PlayStation Move control, you needed the game, and you needed the console. And you had to be a fan of the series.
Yes.
So there was a huge barrier to entry for some people. There's a lot of Potter fans out there that would be like, I would love to have this. What do I need? You need this. And it was just too much for people to kind of to get into. So that was definitely one barrier to entry. And then the other one is just making augmented reality experiences. Playing VR ones, it's full immersion. Playing augmented reality ones, it's kind of more gimmick, I think, than anything else. And we found it very hard to design for these games. We ended up relying on the book more than the augmented reality to do cool things like Diggs Nightcrawler, where you fold over the book so the lamppost goes to the window, so you can climb up the lamppost to get into the window. We used mechanics like that. So we were using less the augmented reality and more the peripheral that we were creating the augmented reality on to create these game experiences. So a mixture of those two things made it very challenging, and I think is the reason why you don't see the market flooded with augmented reality games.
It was a strange time in the industry because obviously the success of the Wii had been just tear away, and instead of thinking what can we do that's our thing, the mindset of the companies at the time was we need a slice of that pie. Not necessarily always the best thing. I think Phil Spencer came out this last week in an interview and said I could never have made the Wii, and sadly it was a sad time for Microsoft where they felt compelled to copy and try and grab a slice of that. That market had already been absorbed by the Wii, so technically it was a dead market. Some of the innovations that came out of it were fascinating, and the Move controllers obviously still survive to this day, bizarrely, on a system that, technically using Move controls on a PlayStation 5 for PlayStation VR, and that boggles the mind that they're still part of it. Comment from...
I have an interesting story just to finish off on that if you want.
Yes, please.
So, the Move controller button is like an A with a tick at the end of it.
Yes.
That is because the controller, up until about 3 weeks before launch, was called Apex.
Really?
And it wasn't until a few of us in the London studio pointed out to Phil Harrison that Apex was actually a line of controllers that Microsoft had, and that there may be some issues. And so it was very last minute changed from Apex to Move controller, but they couldn't change the logo because that had already been printed on all the boxes and all the controllers. And so what you're actually seeing there is the original name and the original logo for the name on the Move controller.
So they kind of like roughly changed that symbol to be the Move symbol, as it's referred to in the UI of the games.
Yep.
Even though it bears no wow. That's, again, we could pick up these anecdotes all day long. Before we finish, we know him as Young Adult Man. Bobby, what's his username?
Juan.gd30ce12. He says, I never played a Book of Spells games. I might have read my grandma's, but never played the game, with a laughing out loud emoji.
young adult man, he comes out with some of the strangest comments. Normally it's Ginger's Games Room, but this week he had a relatively sensible one. Now, with all this talk of AR and, developing different bits and bobs, it was at this point you took a break from Sony and your chance to run your own studio as a director. You also had some involvement with one would imagine this is off the back of Wonderbook potentially, but you also had some involvement with HoloLens.
Mm-hmm.
And while at Microsoft, you were given the chance to become director of your own studio, which is called Studio Lift, and you were involved in the game Eden Falls. Mm-hmm. Do you want to, first of all, how did Sony react when you said that you were up sticksing and going to Microsoft, and what was the mindset behind that? And then maybe if we can, we'll just dig deep on a couple of those nuances, really.
Yep. So there was shock from Sony. I'd been at the company for 12 years. And I actually handed in my resignation just before the Books of Spells finished. So it was going into QA, final QA phase, and that's when I handed in my resignation. And what had happened is 6 months prior to that, Phil Harrison had got his job in Microsoft, and he asked me if I wanted to come to Microsoft and do something. And he said, what would you do? And I said, I'd want to set up a new studio. And, I spent 6 months then feeling terribly guilty working at Sony, but, talking to the enemy about setting up a new studio. But I think it was genuine shock. I didn't even have a leaving interview. You're supposed to have a leaving interview. There was no leaving interview for me. It was just kind of, this is it, you're out. But it was amazing. 12 years, I got this special plaque that the team had put together of all the games that I'd worked on. I had the trophies on there. I was a massive fan of Little Big Planet, so the Media Molecule team had sent me a load of figures that were never released for Little Big Planet. I got a Kratos Sackboy and all that kind of stuff.
How were you sleeping at night with all this premium gaming tat or accolades to your career? And obviously, these people at these different studios knew you so intimately that they knew the gifts to give you that would really tickle your fancy, for want of a better word.
It was really hard. My mum said to me, she said, "Aren't you betraying Sony?" I was like, "Thanks, Mum."
Oh my goodness.
But it's, I had to take a hard look at it. Sony had been fantastic. It's where I'd started my career.
Yeah.
And the reality is that I was probably looking at another 5-10 years before I could get to studio director at Sony. It's a very hierarchical company, and you have to move through the hierarchy.
Yeah.
I was still relatively young at this point, and to be offered to be a studio director in my early 30s, I think probably would have made me the youngest studio director of a big AAA publisher in the UK. So I couldn't pass up that learning opportunity. I had no doubt that I would be fair to middling at it, having never done it before. But I knew I'd built teams and could make games and build products. So I just, it was sad and stressful because of the Sony relationship I had, but at the same time it was exciting because I was going to be doing something very different and culturally different, moving from a Japanese company and culturally I love Japan, and moving to a US company, which was very excited that there's a more challenge-based culture with a US-based company. So very excited about that.
So you get there. HoloLens, there's an interesting Google Glass type makeup by Microsoft. What you stepped through the door thinking you're going to be, working on video games, and you get pulled off to HoloLens. What was your involvement in that?
So we had to sit down and look at the strategy for what we were going to build, Initially, the primary goal was for the team to make HoloLens gaming experiences.
Ah, yes.
But the technology was still in its infancy. And so we came up with another strategy. We actually built 3 strategies in the studio. And it's not all just me. There's a group of talented people that help do this as with any game. And we built 3 strategies. One was a gaming arm, one was HoloLens, and the other one was new technologies. So we created, so I headed up most of this, but I sat quite heavily on the gaming side of things. That's where I was most passionate about.
Yeah.
And we used games as a vessel for all 3 of these key strategies. Now, the HoloLens strategy was waning quite a bit. We did do work on it. We did a Minecraft thing.
Yes, which I've seen this.
So that wasn't the Minecraft demo that they showed, unfortunately. We did some initial technology to prove it could work. But what we did do is that we built some technology that did make it into Minecraft. So our technology arm built 2 things. The first was the Internet of Things, where you could put in a little microchip into objects, and that object would then become a smart object. And it would know exactly what it is. So you could put it into a bracelet, for example, and someone could upload pictures. And what would happen is that you would put your bracelet to your phone and it would show you the pictures they'd uploaded. So you could give it as a birthday present, things like that. That same technology, though, we then utilized to do a strategy that I did come up with my tech director and art director at the time, which was called BOPA. And it's something that I sold into Phil Spencer and to Phil Harrison. And BOPA stands for Buy Once, Play Anywhere. And basically what our tech allowed you to do was that it carried your save data over to multiple different devices via the cloud, allowing you to play a game on any device. And this is where Minecraft moved. And so Minecraft was the first game to adopt this piece of tech that we'd built. And so Minecraft was able to play on the phone. Then you could carry it over to your Switch, onto your PlayStation, onto your Xbox. My vision for this was I wanted to bring games together. Obviously, Sony would never go for it, and Microsoft didn't want it. But that was my ultimate vision for BOPA, is that buy once, play anywhere. Is you buy a game and you play it on any platform.
Ever the visionary.
We knew it was going to be an impossible sell, and it was an impossible sell because these companies sell hardware and games. There's no way they're going to share a single common platform. But that's where Play Anywhere, and I think they've called it Buy Once, Play Anywhere now, but it would Play Anywhere on Xbox came and uses that technology. And I think they may have changed it now, but at one point you could dig into the code and you would see that it was called a lift token. That was the thing that bridged between games. And we, obviously being the Lift Studio, we had that. And so that was the bit of technology that we developed. And the augmented reality stuff started to wane because it was now becoming more business focused than game focused. We still did demos and tech to help push things forward. And then we had games, and we actually produced 2 games. The first games was, I think it was called Cities of Treasure or Secrets of Treasure. I can't remember what it was. I have to look it up again. I've got it on my iPad. And essentially, it was a mobile phone iPad PC game where you have a ball, you shoot it up, and it's like pachinko.
Yes.
Really, really, really good, really popular. It was like the top selling game on the Microsoft Store. The only problem is that we weren't allowed to develop for iPads, even though when you came into our studio, it was just full of iPads everywhere and iPhones. Microsoft didn't want us doing it yet on that. They wanted it on their devices. So it meant we had a very small audience. And then we were creating a stunning game, which I ended up buying off of Microsoft, called Eden Falls, which was a battle builder, kind of like Clash of Clans, but 150,000 times better. The characters were Simpson-esque characters, and it was based in a zombie apocalypse, but you were actually building back humanity and using zombies as a slave labor. So, the Eden Falls comes from that. It is Eden that you're building, but it falls down because you're still using slave labor.
To very
build it.
clever, yeah. But they didn't buy into this concept, did they not?
At this time, and I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but pretty much the European operation in Xbox got shut down. I think the only studio that survived as a game studio was Rare. Lionhead was closed down. We had a couple of other studios in Europe closed down. Because of how we diversified at Lyft, we could actually move into a different business department. So we moved from that gaming Xbox division into the Windows division. And it's at that point I said goodbye to Microsoft because
did that sort of sour your experience there? You'd come in full of passion and may I say, sleepless the night before you walk in there with all these ideas and passion and things you're going to change, and you had all this collected experience and this was your sort of big moment to realize your dream of being a studio director, and you were given the chance, and then kind of prematurely, and Microsoft have a habit of doing this, they kind of overreached themselves with studio acquisitions, and currently they're on the rise again, and hopefully history doesn't repeat itself, and then they kind of freak out, or they don't get the traction on the games exclusives that they're working on, and the rug gets pulled. How did that, as a creative person, did that hurt?
Yeah, I think it hurt quite a few people. We didn't take it personally, though. I mean, they're big corporations, and at that time, and probably still today, the Xbox division barely makes it onto the balance sheet when you compare it next to the products that Microsoft put out.
Of course.
And it was disappointing. It was disappointing that there was a lack of investment in those European studios. I still find it amazing that, Lionhead was closed down, an absolute talent in the gaming industry there.
Yeah.
So it certainly was disappointing, but at the same time, it wasn't taken personally at all. You understand if on the surface what the reasons could be, they'll never tell you exactly why. It's usually down to financial sheets at that point. Can we afford to do this? Where do we invest? But there was a lot of great experiences that came out from it. Great team members that I'm still in contact with.
Nice.
And we made an attempt, myself and the art director who'd come with me from Sony to Microsoft, to keep that game alive for the people that had developed it. And we spent a long time doing a deal with Microsoft to buy the game off them. I think it's the first game they've ever sold. And so, we, again, same as when leaving Sony, some disappointment with leaving Microsoft, but excited that we were now going to set up a new studio to create and carry on this game that the team had worked on.
So I was going to leap straight to talking about BAFTA there, but do you want to sort of tell us a little bit more about this almost startup experience? Was that scary? Because obviously for the first time in your gaming career, it was all on you.
Yeah. It was, and anyone that started up their own business knows this. It was a roller coaster. Every single day was a roller coaster. I set out a strategy for investment where we would go to Japan, China, and Korea. Made a couple of visits over there. And the idea was to talk to these big companies that would want a foothold in Europe and the States. Mm-hmm. And sold ourselves really as that studio, but that studio with a product that had Microsoft investment behind it and was ready to be built out. It was a long, hard road, but we got investment. It was for tens of millions. And we were going through the contract, spending a lot of money on lawyers. I realized how expensive lawyers can be at this point. And we got all the way to the point where we were sending back our changes, and our investor pulled out. Unfortunately, they'd released a game that just didn't do well, and they didn't have the confidence that they could expand. And that all but killed our hopes, because we'd gone down this road of this is how we want our business to run. We develop another game off of that. We decided to build a little idle tap game for a mobile phone, but do it kind of in old school UK style graphics. And that got to number 1 in Holland, which was good. And it did pretty good. We built it in 7 weeks, 3 of us, and put it out. We then did a VR experience, which to this day, it's just a demo, but to this day still gets thousands of people playing it,
really?
Which was called...
What's the name of that?
Icarus 76. We're pretty sure there's a couple of games that have been inspired by it, but essentially you're in a spacecraft, then everything goes black and shaking and you can see sparks flying everywhere. Then you crash and you're inside this pod. You open this door and you're out on like this Mars-like planet, and you get to kind of hop around and explore. But as you explore, you start to come across like switches and runes. And it's a planet that is supposed to be uninhabited, but is really inhabited. And so essentially it's a story puzzle game where the story continues as you kind of solve these puzzles.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that did really well. In the end, we did manage to pass the company off to an IT company who were interested in us. We signed our names off of the company, and that company still exists today. So it wasn't a complete failure, and we went off and got jobs at other companies.
Well, in between then and now, obviously, you've, as if your career wasn't successful enough, you became a member of BAFTA. And I do believe you were directly involved in choosing 2016's Game of the Year, which from my reckoning is probably Uncharted 4. You've also a man who's won multiple BAFTAs. How did it feel to be a recipient and also the giver of such recognition in the industry? And obviously to a worldwide audience, Naughty Dog obviously being based in America, what does a BAFTA mean to games developers across the world?
So a BAFTA is pretty much an Oscar. It's the UK Oscars. And so for games developers, it would be as if Oscars decided that they were also going to have a video games category.
Yes.
And that's exactly what BAFTA have done. They have a video games category, and they have a separate awards night, and they celebrate not only the British games industry, but the games industry globally for its achievements. So winning a BAFTA is a great feeling. It's absolutely a team effort. I don't think there's any BAFTAs that have been run by individuals except for the honorary ones for, hey, this person spent a lifetime in the games industry. Here's your honorary BAFTA. So it's fantastic because it's a team achievement. It always is with those, and it's to be recognized by the industry and your peers is great. I don't think there is an audience participation one. I think it is all industry professionals voting on your games, and there's thousands of them. So essentially, it's acknowledgement from your peers. Again, much like the Oscars, where they're being acknowledged by their industry and their peers for their accomplishments.
Wonderful. And what's it feel? Is there pressure on you for choosing this game? Is it like, oh God, I feel terrible because everyone's tried? As we talked before, no one sets out to make a bad game. When you're sat and the decision is yours, is it? Do you feel some?
It's an interesting thing because how BAFTAs are structured is you have direct voting where they get groups of people together and they decide on which game they would like to go forward. And then you have members voting. So members voting is where everyone who's a BAFTA member votes on the game and the category that they like. And you're given the games usually via Steam or codes, and you play them, and then you put together your view of what you think should go forward. That builds a subcategory that goes off to then a set of judges that then judge on that subcategory. And so I've been a judge on that subcategory, and obviously every year I'm a member, so I get to vote on that. So in some ways it's awesome. I've found some hidden gems where I'm just like, I had no idea this game ever existed, and it's absolutely stunning. But it's in the same category as The Last of Us 2. And I will always vote for a game that I truly believe deserves to win. And there's been some that are minnows in the sea of AAA games that I truly believe should have won, but they don't even get a look in, which is unfortunate. But I think just to be in that group and have professionals and peers play your games, anyone that goes into the BAFTA should feel proud that they've accomplished something that they can actually hand to other people.
Well, I feel that much like an Oscar, winning is an amazing accolade. Having a nomination is, worth almost as much. A BAFTA nominated game, a BAFTA nominated film. It means that you've been included in that very small pantheon, because there's loads of games come out, only a certain few get to be nominated for said prize, and then only one of those wins a prize. But to be in that catch bowl of being even in the same ecosystem as those games, and like you say, there are some very small games in comparison to the AAA blockbusters that, to them, a BAFTA nomination must be unbelievable. From the outset, they never thought they'd be in that mix, and then to be in the mix with these AAA games we've talked about there is fantastic. And the fact that you're still involved in this and your mindset towards it, I find fascinating. I wish we could, obviously, with every single subsection we've been to, I wish we could deep dive even deeper. But with the mindset that an 8-hour podcast might stretch everyone's endurance a little bit, but we there's no rest for the wicked here, as your involvement in some of Bobby's favourite things in gaming trophies. And then For Honor as production director, such an interesting concept. How, I might want to wheel over to Bobby because he's most eloquent in the For Honor universe, but that's such a novel idea. Where did that come from?
So I joined the team as an external team. So basically, Ubisoft have 2 external teams that they work with. And I really wanted to work for Ubisoft, but I didn't want to go over to Canada. My wife didn't want to go over to Canada. So she, that was a no-no for us. But my friends who work in Ubisoft said, this is a studio we're looking at partnering with. Why don't you go and join them? So I went over, applied, got the job as the production director, and then helped them seal the deal on For Honor. And we came in to build certain aspects of For Honor. And this is Ubisoft have huge teams. Like the Assassin's Creed team is nearly 2,000 people all over the world. And For Honor was something like 600 people. So it's massive. So what you're doing is you get given a part of the game to work on. And we were working on basically the live service part of the game, which is the meat of For Honor. There's a single player campaign that was made by Vancouver. And the team in Montreal, who are the originators of For Honor, they didn't have much of a say in the single player campaign, and I think they were a little bit upset about that because they weren't too happy with it. But it was all about the online gameplay, and we went over, spent a lot of time with those guys. We're all good friends. They come over and spoke to us, and we became a part of Ubisoft, working on For Honor, and what they've achieved is stunning because we have a game where swords can grind against each other, which technically is one of the hardest things you could ever do. And so we were given aspect of the game. We took on some multiplayer environments. We did the advanced tutorial because there were people needing, you need more. It's a complex game. It's really hard to master. And so we had to build this new tutorial system, and we built the arcade mode, game mode in there. Now, I try and remember all the environments we built, but we built... there's a fortress, a keep that you have to go in. There's a treetops mission environment as well. What else did we build? We built another 2 as well. We built four in total, and we worked on other bits and pieces. But the team, it was the first new IP Ubisoft had built in a very, very long time. And we went through with the teams as one team, through a lot, because it didn't do too well after its initial launch. We started losing players, but the team had a huge amount of tenacity. They're very passionate about the game, wanted to turn it around, knew they had something special on it. Their engagement with the community is unparalleled. So, we sat down and we were part of these meetings where we were talking about actually taking out essentially the engine. Stefan, who's the producer who runs the project, talks about it as changing the racing car engine as it's going around the circuit. And that's what we were doing. We were changing from peer-to-peer to dedicated servers. One of the most ambitious things I've ever seen undertaken in gaming. At the same time, providing seasonal content, improvements, updates to move sets, balancing, an unbelievable achievement. So it was fantastic working on that game. So grateful to get to work on something like that. I think it's a challenging game to make because it's so hard. And it's so skill orientated. If you get someone at the same skill level as you, it's very, very fun. If you get someone that is a novice against someone that's average, that average person will make you look stupid with the skills. But it's stunning to see these fights. It's like, it really is like ballet with swords, watching some of these players with it. But yeah, it was a huge amount of fun. The team were great. I actually managed to win a statue, which I left at the studio. I forgot what the name of the main enemy was, what her name was.
Apollyon.
Yeah, Apollyon, yeah. I got one of the limited edition statues. And what they did in the studios, they ran across all the global studios in Ubisoft, a competition where you had to promote For Honor in a unique way. And I made a 16-bit version of For Honor with the cartridge, Mega Drive cartridge, and if it was released on the Mega Drive, and I created the manual.
Well, we've seen this in one of your videos.
Yeah. So I put that up, and I won the Apollyon statue. I think there was like 5 or 10 or something that they made.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then when I left the studio, I left that with the studio as well. We used to, every Wednesday, I set this thing called Let's Play, where we would fight. And it was so that we could understand how our levels were developing, but also give feedback. And they did this across all the different studios that were working on For Honor. And I set up a tournament. And I spent the weekend, and I got an old Xbox One that was broken. I bought Excalibur's sword. I smashed it through it, and then did all this stuff with like bits flying off of it and everything. And that was the trophy. And it's huge, about this big, and it's still in their studio now. And it was our For Honor trophy with a huge sword going through the Xbox. And we played off for that. And 2 of our players in our team were, I think, like top 10 in the world at one point. They were just unbeatable. And so whenever I got my Peacekeeper and managed to beat them, it was like, oh yes, I've beat someone that's top 10. But
that's awesome.
So I think my takeaway from that is you're either the King Arthur or the Merlin of For Honor, and you cleaved Excalibur clean into the stone that is the dead Xbox 360, and either you or someone who next pulls that sword out is the king of For Honor, the true king.
That's awesome. I remember getting all my friends when they came out to get it, so we could play together. I got like about 15 people, and only 3 of us stood on it because it was just too complicated for them. In the beginning, it's like, okay, up, down, left, right. You attack, defend, whatever. But then once you get to the certain skill level, it's like you're decimating 3 or 4 people at a time.
Yeah.
If you're that good, and they couldn't grasp it, so they started dropping off. But it was me, my stepfather, and my best friend Marlon. We played hours. We all got the platinum for that game.
Yeah.
Just so many memories of that game from all this time playing. It's just been amazing.
Yeah, it's
Like,
stunning.
even if for me, like, okay, I play all the time, but when I get wrecked, I don't get upset. I'm like, man, this guy's playing way more than I did, clearly.
Yeah.
I just got murdered in 6 moves.
Yeah. It's so satisfying though when you got that skill level and you're parrying attacks because you're making hundredths of a second decisions here. So yeah, it is a fantastic game, and I think it's a real technical marvel that at least in the games industry people look at, and it's just like amazing that the team took on such a challenge to build a game where literally swords grind against axes accurately. It's amazing.
That to keep some, I mean, it's a shame, obviously, that's where we have to leave your AAA gaming career, and hopefully in some time in the future, if you will be so kind to us, we can have you back on to sort of talk about the where, what, when, where, how of the now. But for now, that's kind of sadly where we've got to leave that. Again, I'm sure given the time, we could deep dive For Honor. We could do a whole episode about that. Where your patience threshold starts and ends. But if that glittering career is almost enough to set people's jaws on the floor, you've decided to, with your spare time, and God knows how you find any, because you're a father and you're a husband, and you seem to have a very happy life there. You've got your games room, and you've taken the time to collect a full PAL Mega Drive set, as we hinted at the top of the show, and then to catalogue and show off your amazing collection, and to really be so kind as to share some of your anecdotes and stories. You have a burgeoning YouTube channel. Now that's Retro Gamer Boy. Your wonderful talents in full flow, sir, in every video. When I see your sort of hand come down, and I've only recently been sort of introduced to your content, and you say Konnichiwa, your passion, quite honestly, for this industry is palpable. And that's what draws people in. Fascinating efforts on the intro. You're also part of Retro Refresh with the equally talented and the amazing Nerd Lair, Telesplash Gaming, the Button Bashers, Do You Nerd, Gaming Off the Grid, who I kind of knew about before, but I didn't realize you were part of this clique, as I want to call it. Sega Head and the Chronic Spartan. Obviously, every week, yourself and Sega Head, who I've been introduced to through the medium of your content, you do your weekly Let's Plays. At the top of the show, you alluded to the Batman Arcade, which you just, like a knife in a corner field, you just sway through it as if it was nothing, sir, if I may be so bold. Your talent as a gamer on show as well at that moment. I mean, we've got some questions here which probably are going to be skillful enough to sort of help us explore that. But again, your talent on show there, very impressive. The show and the content and the way it's structured, very well put together. Your passion, even about repairing. I mean, I might be a soft target here because I like to colour in video game boxes to make them look like new as well. But like I say, I could watch you do that for hours. First question out the box. It's the 16-bit prick again. Obviously, he's an aspiring YouTuber himself. He says, I love that channel. I'd love to ask how you managed to get a decent fan base. I notice on his videos that his subscriber rate matches his views, unlike mine, where the views always outweigh the amount of subscribers I have. I'd also like to know what his thought process is before making a video, and if he's always happy with the outcome. Also, if possible, could he give us any tips on the process of actually uploading the video? What kind of tags does he use, i.e. single words or phrases? There's a lot to pick out there. People very blown away by your whole career at this point. And then you've just sort of, as a side project, I'll just be awesome at YouTube at the same time. Where do we start? What about matching your subscribers to your views? Is there any tips there that you can give for the 16-bit prick?
That name's brilliant.
Yes.
Do you know what? It was the toughest thing to build up the YouTube channel. And there's a lot of things that I learned back in my career to help me do it. It was very slow to start. I started off and I had 13 subscribers for months. Wow. And then I didn't break 1,000 until 2019. End of 2019, beginning of 2020 is when I got 1,000 subscribers.
Wow.
And, everyone that does a YouTube channel will know this, who's passionate about the channel is, you look at that one person joining a month and you're like, oh, why is it not more? Why is it not more? And you're looking at the views. And I think there's, I've looked everywhere for secret sauce. Like, tell me how to do this and give me loads of subscribers. And I think, some people find it instantly and get millions, and some people don't. I am one that doesn't, and I'm on the grind. What I would say is that through just sticking with it, I put out one a week. I don't do more. There's people that do say you have to do more. I don't think you need to. I just do one.
Mm-hmm.
I do make it my hobby so that I don't feel like it's a job. So it's all about retro gaming and the things that interest me. What's happened is over time, I've built up a catalog of videos that people can go back to and look at. And that can bring them in if they're interested. One thing I have done is over time improved things. I got to a point where I was confident, and then I got a light. I still use my mobile phone. I have one light and my mobile phone. I have a lapel mic on because I realized audio is important to people.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, and then I started just covering things that I was passionate about and that I think some people would find interesting, and hope that people would find interesting. In terms of secret sauce, I've found that tags do nothing. If you're looking for direct things, tags do nothing. What does count towards it is description and what you say in the first 20 seconds. So if you're talking about the Genesis, if you say Genesis, because YouTube transcribe your text, it also becomes something they search for. So they search for that at the beginning. So if you say the 10 best Genesis games, it reads that as search data, and it will put that in the search data. Then in the description, if you have that as your first lines as well, those are the first two things from a search point of view that it's pushing out. And then obviously the icons are your sales pitch. And this is where that clickbait term comes from. But essentially, clickbait is marketing. All marketing is clickbait. Otherwise, if you were to do the drab truth of what you were selling or promoting, we'd all have grey, dull icons because, to the majority of YouTube, people watching YouTube, they're not interested in your content. But that icon is important. So the things that helped me was I've got a graphic and art background, and I really enjoy that. So I utilize that. I have my experience.
It shows because the banner and the channel and the thumbnails and your intro, perfection personified. I'm glad that we managed to sort of get you on now, because I'd imagine sort of it's snowballing from here, and not because of our influence, obviously, just because of the momentum that you've got and the content. As more people find you, I think they will, instantly want to click subscribe. And then one would imagine if they want to dive a little bit deeper into your, I would say, quite healthy and fun and burgeoning community as well, that £1 a week, easy given, Mike. Yeah. Easy given. Another question, previous guest of ours, they've got a YouTube channel, fantastic videos, again, equal to you in their efforts and knowledge and connections in the film industry. Who is it, Bobby?
Harvey Retro, the immortal Duke himself.
Yes.
Firstly, I'd like to say congratulations on a great YouTube channel. Your presenting is very pro. You have great energy, and the production quality is very high. I love it. As a YouTuber creator myself, I wondered if you had any top tips on growing a channel community, as I'm finally confident in the brand I've developed with Igmatic Productions and quality I'm delivering. I would love more people to see it and enjoy it. Looking forward to hearing the show.
So we've probably kind of covered those off, haven't we there? But there's a man that I implore you to check out if you've got any passion for 80s horror and schlock. They do a series called The Trash Tapes, and they've got,
I love it.
Like a series of sections. They do a podcast, they do live streams and stuff. And, again, a very humble man there. His content is top tier. So I think he's just waiting for the big drop. I think once you get found within your niche, it's only a matter of time. So yeah.
It can be deflating sometimes. I think for me, and it's going to be different for everyone, I have this channel because I want to be part of a community of people that like the same things I do. I live somewhere where there's no one that's really interested in retro gaming where I am, or I've not found anyone. And the AAA games industry, you probably count on your one hand how many people are interested in old video games.
Weird. That's kind of sad, isn't it?
It's so bizarre. You would have thought there'd be lots of them, and there's people that have a passion for it, but would never go and collect or actively engage as much as I do. So for me, my channel was never about how big it could be. It scares me that it's getting bigger because I like engaging with people. And everything I do for it is about being part of that community. So, you mentioned that membership thing there. I wanted to give it away for free, but YouTube don't let you. But the reason why I did it is it's almost got that trophy thing to it, where as you go, and this is how I've structured it, is that if you look at it, you get different colored medals as you go, if you stay longer on the Retro Gamer Boy channel, pretty much like the trophy system. And I've actually now been looking at doing like collector's coins, doing like a retro collector coin that once people get to a year, they get that. My wife's had a heart attack because it costs way more than you get than the actual subscription to the channel costs. But again, for me, it would be just like, these are friends or people that I've met and made as friends, and I want to give them something as if we were just living down the street, they'd probably give me their old games.
What I would say to you is that I was all in anyway. Then you started discussing this coin, and I was like, right, where's the bank card? It was simple. If I can have a Mike Rouse coin, I am stoked. Like I say, I'm going to work on getting the full Mike Rouse set. So I've got to pick up some This Is Footballs and some other games that we're not touching on today, but I'm not far away. So yeah. And I didn't realize that Diggs Nightcrawler, and now I need, obviously, which I've got, but now I need Walking with Dinosaurs because your hand has touched it. So yeah, and then they need a spare Wonderbook as well. So yeah, it doesn't stop, does it? The eclectic mix of things that I've collected, it just never stops. I think obviously, as we always say, we can't always have everybody's question on, and obviously sometimes people ask the same question. So we've read every question, and I'm sure Mike's glanced across every question that's been on the Instagram and the Twitter and all that sort of stuff. And obviously there's been discussions in the Discord channel as well. Not everything makes it on, but we have read everything, and we value everybody who's put time into asking some questions. There's probably just some quick fire ones, really, just to run through. Roast Space Monk says, looking forward to hearing from Mike on the show. As a developer, what's your proudest achievement? And as a retro games collector, what is your most prized possession?
I think my proudest moment in games is the trophy system. So many people love that. I know the guy who has the largest trophy collection in the world, and he messaged me back and just said, "Hey, you've given me a life I couldn't have dreamed of," which was amazing to hear. Most prized possession? Oh, I've got so much stuff. Can I have two?
You can have it. Listen, you're Sir Mike Rouse of the Unofficial Controller podcast, and you're one of the co-hosts for this episode. So you can have five if you want.
I'll keep it to two. So I think definitely my signed copy of Zelda from Miyamoto. I met him for a second time when he came to London for the only time.
Wow!
And he signed my copy. I queued up. I think it was like 15th in the queue. So he signed the original Zelda for me.
Did he recognize you?
I don't think so.
Unbelievable, Miyamoto.
I know.
Two legends in sort of very close area. You'd think the world would implode on itself, but maybe that's why he didn't ignite. He was like, "Oh my god, something. I'll just sign this, let him go."
Yeah. So definitely that. And then I love my Mark 1 Mega Drive Mega CD 32X.
The Tower of Power, sir.
Yes, I mean there's tons of other stuff in here which I would put on the list, but I love that console. A lot of nostalgia. It was the first CD player I ever had. It was, obviously the Mega Drive was, I think it sold slightly more copies than the SNES over here in the UK. So it was a real, are you an Xbox PlayStation fan? It was a real competition in the UK for those two consoles. But yeah, I love that. A lot of good memories with that console. And then the 32, even the 32X, there's some games on there that I absolutely loved. And having that console in my collection is awesome.
Nice. Okay. A similar vein, Bobaloba. Bobaloba doesn't just do comments. Bobaloba does the finest comments podcasts can buy. I'll start by welcoming Mike to the finest podcast community money can buy. You have an impressive collection of retro games. If you had to get rid of all but one, which would you keep? And when can I expect to receive the rest?
Oh, that's such an unfair question. I'm looking around. You can't see me, but I am looking around the small collection that I've brought with me in the box. I don't know. I don't think I could pick one. And I'm definitely not giving them all away. I don't know.
A lot of pressure, this question.
It's
too much.
Would it be the Tower of Power? The aforementioned?
To be honest, I'm having a bit of a meltdown here. I don't think I'm able to cope with the thought process. I've definitely lost control of my legs now as I try to figure out what this is.
I think, to be fair, keeping you in the small box that you were transited from the UK to New York in very close proximity to what you've referred to as cheese. I think that's probably starting to have an effect. Last couple of questions then before we let you out the box. Comic Picture 79 says, from the point of view of a person who makes games, do you think all games should be on all systems wherever possible? I think he's alluding to sort of locked exclusives on certain consoles and gaming platforms, PC, Xbox, PlayStation, etc. What's your viewpoint on that?
That's the dream for me. I doubt it will ever happen. There are laws in this world that would stop that happening. So you can't have a monopoly on certain industries. So I don't think we'll ever get that. But I would love to just be able to turn on a console and there's my game collection. Equally, as someone that's collecting consoles and games, I love the fact that there is a lot of different games and consoles around. The thing that scares me and excites me in equal proportions is that I'm pretty sure we're coming to the end of physical media and consoles.
Agreed.
It is quite possible, at least for Microsoft and for Sony, that this is the last physical hardware cycle they see. Nintendo has a different business model. They're more like a toy manufacturer than the others that are selling services. In some ways, yes, I'd love to see it all on one platform. In others, I love that there's different platforms out there. It keeps the industry alive. It keeps people on their toes to push forward, push better. We would have never have got the most expensive Blu-ray player you could buy shipped in a PlayStation 3 at the price it was if it wasn't for the competition of Microsoft and Nintendo on Sony. We would not have got a DVD drive that could play movies, the most expensive DVD drive that you could get in a PlayStation 2 if we didn't have competition from Nintendo and Sega. We wouldn't have got online if Dreamcast hadn't pushed first for that. Yeah. There's these things help actually make the industry and the games that we get better. So I see there's an ideal where we can just put something on and there's a game and it plays. And I think, but the reality is given us such a great industry. This competition, the Game Awards, console wars, they've actually been fantastic for us as gamers. They've meant that it's pushed people to make better and even more impressive experiences that we can lose ourselves in.
That's an interesting little mind journey you've sent me on, because obviously in times of war, in times of peace we kind of move along quite sedentary, and then we hit a time of war and technological innovation goes through the roof. The most obvious sign of that was World War II. So keeping the industry competitive and at loggerheads in your way is kind of these exclusives or one-off exclusives or services that are mapped to one system through the years, as you say. Maybe it's blast processing, maybe it's mode 7 or whatever it is. We're kind of developed out of necessity and still continue to be developed out of necessity to get that edge in the marketplace where every dollar and cent counts.
Yeah definitely.
Wonderful. Well, here's to that continuing. And I, like you, lament the death of physical media, although maybe my house rafters will breathe a sigh of relief as there's no more plastic coming out. That's okay. And relax. Last question. Retro Gamer Thomas is so excited. I think he's messaging more times than my own mum. He says, so pleased you've got Mike on, a great guy, and I could listen to him all day with his gaming knowledge and insight into the industry. I'd like to ask what he would say is the thing he's most proud of working on. I think we've been there, but if you could maybe give us one last dalliance, this is the last dip in the bag for this is your life special. And he's proud of, and game he's proud of or system he got to work on, plus, and again, we'll find some more time for this, but everyone check out his YouTube. It's fantastic and very professional for clapping in exalted praise emojis.
Well, like I said, I think trophies is the thing I'm most proud of. If I had to think of a game, I'm really proud of the game that my team's just put out, which is fantastic. It's I can't go too much into it because I'm under different NDAs, but
we wouldn't want you to.
It's an open world city game, and I've got fond memories looking back at doing games like the Getaway and PlayStation Home. They've all been different, and I think that's a blessing. Some people get stuck on a first-person shooter for their entire careers. I've done a football game. I've done an open-world driving game. I've done a karaoke game. I've done a social service. I've done a mobile game. I've done a VR game. And you get to meet a lot of different people in that by doing that. And I think I'm so blessed and humbled to be able to work with these talented people and get to make those games. And then what was his other question? That was favorite game.
2 seconds, because I've prepared for the arrival of the immortal Stingray. I kind of
you clicked away.
I did. I'm a very naughty boy, really. Retro Gamer Thomas would probably set his mum on me. No, I think that's it. Oh, what's the system you're most proud of having worked on?
Oh, that's a good one. I think, I don't know. I quite liked working on the Vita. So again, we didn't cover this much, but I had a very, very small part to play with the Vita in that I helped test and feedback on it. In the early days of Vita,
wow.
they would get PlayStation 3 games and then just hook the screen and the actual device up to a PS3, so you were controlling it through the Vita, and that was so that we could get the controls right on the Vita. So really, really happy to be part of that. Also happy to be part of the PS4 at the same sort of time, and they got all the directors from different studios together to give feedback on what they wanted. I just have to make it clear, I asked for backwards compatibility and I was smacked down for it. And I said, we should have it. And they said, why? And I said, because gamers love playing their old games. And they didn't go with backwards compatibility on the PS4. But that was something I wanted. And something I was really hoping for from the PS5, is I would like them to turn up and say anything with a PlayStation logo on will play on this machine.
Do you think that's obviously? I admire that idea, and I've heard different arguments for backwards compatibility. I think when push, Sony have been able to pull some stats that say it's a great idea, but here's some stats that say, although people say they want it, almost to the point of like threatening death, the actual amount of people percentage-wise that use it is minimal. Now,
it's going to be very minimal. But it's, again, we talked about earlier that fan service that Microsoft does so well. It costs a lot. You've got to re-QA these games or build an emulation system that means that you don't have issues with them. Some games will have problems because they had online connectivity. Other games will have problems because they used a certain controller. But I just love, and I think it's more of, for me, it would be the last hurrah from Sony with one console plays our back catalogue of physical games before they move on to all digital.
Well, with that in mind, if they are about to move to an all digital, and obviously with the anniversaries that have come and are going to come, it would be a nice celebration. I just don't know. I don't know how you can slow a Blu-ray speed down to read a black label CD PlayStation 1 game and a blue PlayStation 2 CD-ROM and that'll work, and then equally so. I mean, they're getting PlayStation 4 working because, I mean, I don't pretend to know the full ins and outs, but it's not too dissimilar to the PlayStation 5. But the PlayStation 3 would almost be like taking it and turning it into Arabic and then asking it to sort of balance on a ball while doing it. It's PlayStation 3 was a very and seemingly purposely obtuse system to develop for, because it would build this sort of wall of PlayStation around it where it was hard to port to other systems, but also they didn't want people making games they thought they would be the lead system, and therefore when Xbox 360 came out the gates and was easy to develop for, it totally caught them by surprise.
It's all those sub processes that handle different aspects of the game make it very hard to emulate for.
You would almost need to sort of partition it down and say, okay, your cell 1 to 5 over there, like, right, okay, let me get my head around that for a moment. And by that point in time, the game's probably slowed down to, I mean, it might give me a chance to be good at games because it's 2 FPS, but playing in slow-mo mode, like some quality unofficial controller. Mike, I think that draws a line. Hopefully we would love to have you back to talk about Life, the Universe and everything again. It's been an absolute joy. And let me hand you the red book with the gold writing on it. If only El Buccio provided me enough money to eat, I probably wouldn't have wasted the budget on food. I would probably have made you this red book, but sadly it's not worked out that way. But at some point in time, we'd like to do that. We've extended you a knighthood. Now, the one thing that most guests are most excited about when they come on the show is meeting. And it again proves that me and Bobby aren't absolutely insane and have been locked in a room with a lid off the glue for too long. Stingray. Now, in preparation for you coming on board, he's been out because he's a little bit of a man of iniquity. He's been out rather naughtily, so I'd avoid these if I were you, building repros of the games that he thinks that you don't have, in the hope of passing them off as genuine. I see Castlevania Bloodlines or the New Generation in the back, that's what I saw on Tuesday. God knows what else he's got in there. With that said, he tears down Fifth and Main. It's time for a peek in what we affectionately call Stingray's boot. What's nestled between some counterfeit nappies and a dodgy copy of Battlefront Door this week? These are the new release highlights for the week March 1st to March 7th, 2021. Listeners, these are out on digital or physical, or will be by the time this podcast is in your feed, but could be. Bear that in mind, gentlemen and gentle ladies. They could be region dependent. Now, the smoke has settled, the dust has cleared, the springs have finished moving. Quite how he's managed to get a car all the way up to the top floor of a penthouse overlooking Central Park, I do not know. But we don't question it, because he appears almost like smoke from one of the air conditioning grates in front of us. Now, I see him as a man with denim, looking a little bit like Paul Carth, sucking on a dirty Lambert. I don't know what Bobby sees. He's probably smoking the Bandit. How does he make himself visually known to you? How does your visual cortex perceive Stingray?
Well, it's the most peculiar thing, because he looks like my grandfather, but his lower half is smeared in honey and sprinkled with hundreds of thousands. It's the bizarrest thing.
That's why you were knighted. Oh, man. Wow. Okay. I wish I could see that, because I think I'd nibble on your grandfather's lower half, which kind of makes me a little bit concerned. With that said, let's keep ourselves composed. Let's keep ourselves composed. You know the format, so there's a mummy to pick from there. I think you've probably settled on something. Bobby's got a mummy. Mm-hmm. I'm going to reach into the back of what I see to be a Nissan Bluebird C plate. You know, little old, little bit of rust, and it's got those little finger "I'm trapped" stickers you used to get from back in the 80s. I'm going to pull out Harvest Moon One World on the Switch, March 2nd. Begin your new life with a whole world to explore. Maybe manage growing a farm while exploring a world of adventure, diverse cultures and friendships in Harvest Moon One World on the Switch. Interesting. What's next? Do you want to? Is there one for you there, Mike?
I'm quite interested, mainly because of the title, in Sir Lovelot.
Okay.
Yeah, available on the PC, PS5, PS4, Xbox, Switch. It's on everything. It must be good. Sir Lovelot is on a quest to find the love of his life. Join him in this wacky, tight platformer where unimpressing, cheeky damsels is harder than a heart of stone.
Sir Lovelot will do that to you.
Yes, I'm excited by that.
Bobby, what's next?
Mine or down?
Next one down.
Okay, we got Maquette for PC, PS5, PS4. It's free, actually, for PlayStation. It's a first-person, March 2nd. Maquette is a first-person puzzle game that takes you into a world where every building, plant, and object are simultaneously tiny and staggeringly huge. So it's a free game if you have PS Plus.
There's a Deep South video game if ever I saw one. Monster Jam Steel Titans 2 on a PC, a PS4, Xbox One, Stitch, and the greatest console I've ever played on the Stadia. March 2nd, more trucks, new worlds, Monster Jam Steel Titans 2. Monster Jam Steel Titans 2 features more fan favorite trucks in a brand new Monster Jam worlds. They love putting Monster Jam in recursive times. I remember, I don't know what episode it was, where Monster Jam Steel Titans 1 launched. We've put a shift in, Mike, I tell you. Next is my mummy. Yakuza Like a Dragon PS5 March 2nd. Become Ichiban Kusaga, a low-ranking Yakuza grunt left on the brink of death by the man he trusted most. Take up your legendary bat and get ready to crack some underworld skulls in dynamic RPG combat set against the backdrop of modern-day Japan. Bobby, I think you've got quality. I'm glad you've got this.
Gnoza?
Yeah, oh yeah.
If I said it right, it's on Switch, March 4th. The Gnoza lie. Pretending to be human, they'll get close, tick, and deceive, and then eliminate one victim at a time. The crew of a drifting spaceship facing off against a mysterious and deadly threat known as the Gnoza, and having no idea who among them, the enemy, formulate a desperate plan for survival. The most suspicious among them will be put into a cold sleep one by one in an effort to rid the ship of Gnoza. So basically, The Thing.
Basically, yes. Mike, do you want to have a little dip in?
Yeah.
What's out next?
So this is a dev team that was struggling for a name. Kill It With Fire. PS4, Xbox, Switch on March the 1st. Kill It With Fire, a first-person action game about hunting spiders and causing collateral damage, supposedly with fire.
Oh, yeah.
This is my mummy.
Oh, okay.
Mortal Shell Enhanced Edition for the PS5 and Series X, March 4th. Mortal Shell is a deep action RPG that tests your sanity and resilience in a shattered world. Your adversaries spare no mercy, with surviving demanding superior awareness, precision, and instincts. I almost have something else there. Possesses lost warriors, track down hidden sanctums of the devout, and face formidable foes.
Okay. Next out the boot, Ranch Simulator PC March 4th. Builder, farmer, hunter, trader. Ranching certainly isn't your average job. Think you have the skills to turn your family's rundown homestead into the most prosperous ranch in the valley? Then it's time to head out into the wilderness in this captivating single multiplayer open world simulator. Last one out the boot. It's your honor, Sir Mike Rouse.
Thank you very much. And it messes with my dyslexia because I'm looking at it and going, is it Ant on Ball or Antona Ball?
We have the same issues, Mike.
Yeah, so I'm going to go.
What I would say is, as a knight of the realm of the Unofficial Controller podcast, you could just change that name completely, whatever you want it to
fantastic. I think a better name for it would be if they did Ant on Ball Deluxe.
Okay.
Ant on Ball Deluxe, March 5th. This breakout title from Summit Sphere. Ant on Board Deluxe is a retro high-octane smorgasbord of ball-busting arcade action. Ant on Board Deluxe quite literally turns the breakout genre on its head, blending traditional brick-breaking gameplay with tight, intense platforming. Sounds exciting.
Wow. Okay. Before he's allowed to leave, we have a VHS pick. Now, mine, I think, unless I picked it out before, I don't think I have, is Dick Tracy, the Warren Beatty Madonna vehicle. I'm having that, so thank you, Stingray, for that. It's a dodgy-looking cam copy from the 90s. You know, it survived this long. I'll take it. Sir Mike Rouse, what do you have?
I'm picking up the copy of Dark Crystal. Unfortunately, the end has been spliced with the middle of Fight Club, so I'll never know how it ended.
I don't know. To be honest, you very quickly got into the vein of the whole show, sir. It's absolutely amazing. That I knew knighting you was not wasted. Bobby, what's your VHS pick?
Barbarella. Not Queen of the Galaxy, just the original Barbarella.
Okay. Well, with that, the boot slammed. Some would say we don't hear the noise of him leaving because we're too cheapskate to actually get one. But some would argue that he just evaporates into almost like a mist and we inhale him. I don't know what goes on. One way or the other, he's no longer around. This is why people question whether he even exists. Those that paid attention at the start of the show, they heard me ask you what you've been playing. So, Odders, you can relax your grip on your bag of swag and your jar of jellied eels, friend, because it's time to ask these gentlemen what they're hoping to play for this gaming week. Mike, Sir Mike Rouse, you must go first.
Yeah. I would love to get some time playing Alien Soldier on the Sega Mega Drive. It's like a boss rush game, super intense, visually stunning for the Sega Mega Drive. I'd love to be able to get into that. And I've been dreaming about, weirdly enough, GT Club on the PlayStation 3 from Konami. I just happy memories of going to the arcade and playing that. So I might play that. And also I purchased but never played Sleeping Dogs on the PS3.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Ooh.
So and it's a game that I've looked at all the time. Just like, I want it. I want to play it. I want to play it. So I think I'm going to sit down, lock myself in the remainder of this cheese-covered box and play some Sleeping Dogs.
Well, don't get too comfortable because we're going to slap a return label on that and put it straight back on the speedboat it came on. But, you know.
Oh, God. Can we drop the cheese out then? Because that's going to be rancid by the time I get back.
It's not cheese. And I think El Bucho would insist that it was left here. It's part of his import strategy.
Right, okay.
Yeah, we can move guests quite easily through this speedboat network, but one would imagine the contraband has to stay in the,
Unfortunately.
That's an eclectic mix if ever I heard one, but one that befits your. Is there a little? Can you give us a sneak peek of what you might be playing on your live stream this week?
No, because I haven't decided.
Oh, okay. Well,
fair enough.
You know how to build suspense. Top tips for the people wondering how to build a YouTube channel. Suspense is key.
Yes.
Bobby, what's your games you're hoping to play, good squire?
Just Sniper 3, finish that up, and then Cyberpunk, and knock that out.
Okay. Well, I'm probably going to be hoping to rebuild from the ground up a PSP to make my mint one there that I wanted. I've always wanted a black mint PSP, to go with my PS3. I had a white one, and then if you can't buy one, build one. It's what I expect.
Absolutely.
It's got to be right.
And then before we leave, I just wanted to say, my stepfather, basically, he really got into Vinnie Jones for some odd reason. I'm not sure how he became a fan of him, but he used to watch Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels like all day, every day. And then he watched Snatch. And then he actually picked up to buy me The Getaway because he felt like it was like a Guy Ritchie video game. So he watched me play it, didn't really understand it, but he started playing Black for video games. So really, The Getaway is what got him into playing the PS2. Wow. But he couldn't understand how to play that. So he played something easier. But without The Getaway, or without Vinnie Jones, really, who knows what this man would ever play video games ever, really.
Wow.
So it's kind of an interesting... I got to ask him how he got into Vinnie Jones. So thanks to Vinnie Jones, I got The Getaway as a gift.
Wow.
Nice.
Well,
thank you.
And that's really, we just want to take a bit of time out. Obviously, Retro Gamer Boy on YouTube, people can find you there. As I implored everybody, hopefully through the show, and hopefully that's resonated with them, to click subscribe. It literally costs nothing. If you're thinking about weighing up whether to subscribe to our show or to Mike's, drop us like a hot stone and get on the Mike Rouse bandwagon, please. What's wrong with you people? You obviously have no perception or barometer of quality unless you're following Sir Mike Rouse, the first knight of the realm of the Unofficial Controller podcast, and an accolade that I think is befitting of the man.
Another lore for the show.
Another bit of lore for the show. If we haven't offended you too much or freaked you out with that small fiberglass compartment that we've kind of kept you locked in, really, which has been you've been very good about it. A lot of people would have kicked off and screamed to be let out, but you've been such a good egg. You've got involved with the lore of the show. I think a very humble man, and I hope through the medium of our This Is Life experience that you can get some appreciation for how the outside world looks in to your career and literally is blown away by it. You've touched every cornerstone of the industry as we know it, and I think that you should be. I mean, I think you are, but just to reaffirm that, you should be suitably proud. And a man of your status, you're a very, very humble man, and having you on has been an absolute joyous experience. So if people want to check out your back catalogue of games, we implore them to do that. I mean, at the moment, some of those games are abound, so they can get on board that bandwagon. Some of your newer titles that we can't talk about right now, and we'd love to be, again, afforded the honour to have you on to talk about where you are in your life right now. Maybe pick up the red book and write a new chapter in it.
Yeah, I'd love that.
I would thank you again. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Mike. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, super do. With all that said and done, unless is there anything else that you want to do to further direct people to anything specifically that you're doing at the moment, or?
No, but it'd be great if you could drill a couple more holes in the lid. It's a bit tough breathing on the way over.
We'll do. I'll do it for you, no problem.
Fantastic.
I think we can hang up.
I really appreciate that.
I mean, there's no contraband on the out journey, so I guess we can get away with like smells and stuff. So yeah, that okay.
Yeah, you got it. I got you.
Than me. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Well, I'm going to poke in a tin of mushy peas and one of those really cheap can openers through the slot, just so you got something to keep your mortal form sustained on the return journey. Again, you've been very humble. I need to just tell everyone to find you social media, find your clique, as we called it, with the Gaming Off the Grid and Sega Head and all those wonderful people, and to double down on the content that's been created. Button Bashers, for example. I watched a video where you quite funnily opened up as a Geordie, which I guess you're even better at accents than me. So at this moment in time, I'm just basking in your reflected glory, really. Let's draw a line under that. Thank you again, sir. Let me do the famous outro, or infamous outro. That's all we have time for this week, listeners. As always, thank you for your time. We look forward to the pleasure of speaking to you again next week. Until then, happy gaming. And remember, there's nothing wrong with being given the unofficial controller. It's what you do that counts. See you guys.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks, Mike.